Welcome to HP FanFiction. Support me by subscribing the channel. Also, like and share the video to keep me motivated to make more videos like these. For Amelia Bones, it had been days since she had a less strenuous minute. She had searched the ministry high and low for every trace of paper about Sirius Black. What she had found was more concerning than the Quibbler had shown. There had been no documentation about the imprisonment of Sirius Black at all. The only paper trail she could pick up was the trail that had started days after his imprisonment in Azkaban. When you looked solely at the files of Azkaban, Sirius Black has suddenly surfaced as he vanished 12 years later. Amelia Bones could nothing but frown when looking at that, so she had taken her evidence and had approached the minister about it, just to be turned down without even being able to utter one word about it. The next step would have been to talk to the whole Wizengamot, but Amelia dreaded this discussion. The most members of the Wizengamot would not listen to her as soon as she uttered the name Sirius Black. The entire public thought him to be a convicted murderer, and no member of the Wizengamot would dare to crash his or her public image for a might-be. So there was just one way. Amelia Bones was sitting in her office, smirking. In her hands she was holding an edition of the Quibbler. Normally she would have dropped dead before being found with the abstruse newspaper in her hands. But that had changed a few days after Harry Potter's trial, when one of her auras had dropped by to show her the article in the Quibbler. At that time she had been very interested in the critique the Quibbler had printed. Critique about the press and the ministry was something you could not read every day. It even had some new information for Amelia herself. She had not known that the ministry had the major share in the stocking of the Daily Prophet. To her shame, she never had thought once about the connection between the ministry's opinion and the opinion of the Daily Prophet. For her it had been natural that ministry and prophet said the same things. Of course she had seen the slandering of Harry Potter that followed the end of the Triwizard Tournament. She simply had thought that that was what press would do. She never had thought that maybe Fudge himself would be behind the slandering and wrong information the press was printing. Now she wasn't so sure anymore. The slandering that followed the trial last week, she looked at more critical. A formality that prevented that the boy was tried. She knew it wasn't like that, but she could do nothing to stop the press from printing. She would lose her job if she tried, she was sure. Fudge would arrange it. He was not pleased with her for letting the boy prove his point, but she had followed the law, so he could not fire her for something like that. When she tried to influence the press instead, she would be gone before she could even look his way. And Amelia felt furious because of that. She normally did not care about the Daily Properhead, but to slander an innocent boy just because the minister did not like the young one, that was truly appealing. The boy, after all, was not older than her own niece, and Amelia knew her niece would be devastated if anyone would dare to print things like that about her. Someone should have protected the boy from the press. Someone should have helped him to organize a barrister to stop the slandering of the prophet. Amelia could not fathom why Albus Dumbledore had done nothing to protect the boy until now. She knew that the headmaster himself had organized a barrister for himself to stop the slandering of his own name some weeks ago, so why hadn't he done so for his own ward too? And then there was Fudge. The minister was on the warpath against the headmaster and the boy who lived. Amelia was sure he would try everything to destroy both of them utterly, and there had been nothing Amelia had been able to stop him. After all, the minister controlled the prophet. But now, she smiled, still holding the newspaper in her hands. Maybe she could use a different approach. She stood up and left her office, the newspaper still in her hand. "I will go to lunch," she told her assistant. After that she left to the apparition point and apparated away to Diagon Alley. There, at her preferred restaurant, an old friend was waiting for her. Amelia had sent her friend a letter to meet her here after she had found the article in the newspaper. She was still clutching in her hands. "Augusta," she greeted the old woman. Augusta Longbottom smiled at her. "Amelia, my dear, nice to see you again." They sat down in a private booth, and after they ordered, Amelia showed her old friend the article she had found in the Quibbler today. "Look at that and tell me what you think," she instructed, showing the old lady the letter of Oliver Twist and the parts of the trial script. Zeno Lovegood had inserted that showed Oliver Twist's point of view before he had answered the letter. Well, that definitely is something, Augusta Longbottom stated after she finished reading the article. Zeno should watch out what he is writing. I don't think that Fudge likes it very much. I don't think our minister is aware of it, Amelia answered, smirking. He is not reading the Quibbler. I thought the same about you, my dear, Augusta answered. Amelia smirked again. Well, I didn't, she answered. But some weeks ago an Aura brought me the paper because of an interesting article, the first article from this Oliver Twist. And you decided to follow it a little bit longer in case it was not a one-time article? Yes. So why did you ask me here? Augusta leaned back. The door opened and their food arrived. They waited until the waiter had left the room again before continuing. I want to publish this article somewhere else, Amelia stated, smiling evilly. I want it read from as many persons as possible. The Daily Prophet won't print it, Augusta answered. I know, they are in the pocket of the ministry, Amelia answered, still smiling, and suddenly Augusta smirked. You are clever, my dear, she said. I will ask, and I will write Zeno. He will know how to contact Mr. Twist. I thought you would catch on, Amelia said, and took out some other papers. These are trial scripts of Mr. Potter's trial. I am sure the minister will catch on soon. He will seal the court script, so I made some copies. These are the only ones? No one other has come to get a copy? Augusta asked with a raised eyebrow. No, Amelia answered, smiling. There are until now 55 others who have come. As soon as we have published it, I will leave these in some public places. Augusta promised, smiling. After that they spoke of different things, and when Amelia finally returned to work, she felt better than she had for a long time now. She even had to stop shortly before returning to her work to let the smirk vanish from her face. Now she just had to wait a little bit more, and then she could finally strike and demand a trial for a man she suddenly doubted that he was really guilty. Harry smiled. In his right hand he was holding an edition of the next edition of the Quibbler. It would start to be sold next week. In his left hand he was holding a letter solely addressed to him. Well, not really to him, but still to him. It was a letter addressed to a fellow called Oliver Twist, and it was an invitation to write for the Quibbler as a columnist. Harry had read the letter twice until now. Then he finally decided to answer the letter positively. This was a chance he had to take. In that moment another letter arrived. It also was addressed to Oliver Twist. Winky gave it to him, smiling. Another letter for you, Master Harry, she said. He took it and dismissed her again. This time his smirk even widened when he read the letter he got. Dear Mr. Twist, it said, we wish to ask you to be allowed to also publish your articles in our newspaper. We are especially interested in Sirius Black and your opinion why there was no trail to begin with. If could research this fact and maybe ask in your new letter, and if Xenophilius Lovegood would be inclined to answer, we would pay you both the wage of a freelancing journalist for this article and any other you come up with. If you accept, please add your account number and the name of your account manager. Sincerely, Amanda McDougall, Editor-in-Chief for The Witches Weekly. Harry grinned. Well, that was something he could work with. He quickly penned a reply and gave it to Winky to deliver. His chances were increasing. Soon he would be able to step some great men on the toes without getting burned by doing it. A few days later, Amelia Bones sat in her office, when suddenly Fudge stumbled in. I need your auras, he cried. Amelia just raised an eyebrow at his words. They have to arrest someone, Fudge continued. Who? A fellow named Oliver Twist. Fudge answered, huffing. He dared to print rubbish in the Witches Weekly. You are reading the Witches Weekly, Minister? Amelia asked with surprise in her voice. Yes, of course not. But Dolores does, and she saw this offending article. We have to arrest this Twist fellow, and Lovegood also. Lovegood? I am sure that Xenophilius Lovegood does not publish in the Witches Weekly. So why do you want to arrest him for an article in this newspaper? Amelia asked. Inwardly she laughed at the minister. He was far too late. The article was printed and the most would have read it by now. There was nothing he could do anymore except of huffing and puffing and howling. Of course, the Witches' Weekly wasn't the Daily Prophet, but it definitely had a better reputation than the Quibbler. And there were many witches that read Witches' Weekly just for the fashion tips printed inside. There definitely wasn't a better audience than the wives of the most influential lords or the ladies themselves. But he did this time, the minister cried in that moment, throwing the offending article on the desk before Amelia. Look at it, they dare to mock me, the Minister of Magic. Amelia took the newspaper and looked dutifully at the article. I am still not sure why you came to me, she finally said while putting the article back on the desk. Because you are the head of the law department, and you have to arrest those two individuals, Fudge answered. They are slandering the ministry. I cannot see any slandering in the article at all, Amelia answered. It is based on the truth. The boy cleared himself quite effectively. But there is no way that is allowed to be printed, Fudge howled. There is no law against it, Amelia said. Would there be? The Daily Prophet would have to close its business a long time ago. Fudge blinked and gawked at her. Then he turned on his heels and stormed out of the door. 10 minutes later, Amelia heard that the archive with the trial scripts had been closed for the public. She just smirked. The minister was far too late. When she finally left her office, dozens of people had read the article and even more had looked for the trial scripts themselves. She later discovered that nearly 100 trial scripts after the publishing in the Witches' Weekly had been given out before the minister had time to close the doors of the archive, not counted the others that had been given out after the article in the Quibbler a week before, and the scripts Amelia and Augusta Longbottom had. A day later, the whole wizarding world was discussing the unfair trial of one Harry Potter. Amelia smiled. Maybe if she pushed a little bit more, she soon would be able to push for trials that were due for more than a decade. Meanwhile, another woman was smirking at the article. Augusta Longbottom had bought herself the Witches' Weekly after the article had been printed just to be able to read it again. The way it was written, it reminded her of a man she had though to be dead. But then, Oliver Twist, she whispered to herself, a young orphan hero in a Muggle novel, searching for love and acceptance, used by thieves and driven away or stolen away from those that accepted him. Oliver Twist, she whispered again, smirking. Twist, like Twisty. A person that was able to twist and turn and still come out on top. There's just one man I could think of that would have thought about something like that, she concluded. The only problem, she thought he had died. Or vanished. Augusta reminded herself, well, it seems I have to take up correspondence with a fellow lord again. Augusta searched through her drawer until she found parchment that had no embodied family crest. She knew that when she was right and the man she was thinking about really had written the letters, tarned as a teenage boy, then she would have to be careful. The man had vanished years ago. It would not endear her to him when he really was in hiding, and she would flush him out by writing this letter on her usual parchment. Oh, I feel young again, she chuckled while setting out her writing utensils. My dear Professor, I would never have thought that I might have the chance to see you again. And then she started writing. She wrote not much, just enough. Augusta did not want to reveal too much if someone else was intercepting her letter. Professor Malfoy, I am quite sure that those twisted messages are your doing. If I am right, please consider my help in whatever plan you are working on. After all, you and I both know that some people seem to think too high of themselves and their knowledge and age. If you want to crease this sureness, one word and I will follow. Augusta Eller, born as Hogwarts alumna in 1870. Now to the owl. Augusta chose a common barn owl and sent it out with the instruction to bring the letter back if the person it was addressed to was dead. Not that she believed him dead, and it wasn't only because the professor had been enchanted with the story of Oliver Twist and Charles Dickens in general, it was also because of the way the letters were written. No one that Augusta knew of would choose a name like Oliver Twist and write like that but the professor. Now I just have to wait and see what he is up to. And maybe warn Neville. The poor boy would be crushed down to living powder if he ever came face to face with the professor without a warning first. A few hours later, a barn owl, followed by another, reached the window of a shabby-looking house in London. It was the middle of the night and no one but a young-looking man was awake in the whole house. The young man had been dreaming about a corridor and a door and had woken just a few minutes earlier. He opened the windows and let in the owls. The two owls were followed by a third that seemed to have waited for the window to open. The young man raised an eyebrow at that but took the letters anyway. He knew that this would be the last week to get the letters like this. He had risked to get the letters personally until now, but in Hogwarts he would not be able to do so. I need to tell the goblins that they will get my mail until Dobby or Winky collect it, Harry thought while opening one letter after the other. The first one was a reply he had been waiting for since he had written his dear old friend about the thief he had found, the thief who had stolen from his friend not one but 2 times already. My dear old friend, let it go. It's not worth it. You might have found the thief, but think about the price that could come with it when you tried to capture him. You have a life to live. Do not live it solely for revenge. There are still people in this world that care for you. Live for them. Forget what the thief has stolen. It was time to loose it anyway. Your old friend. Me. Harry snorted when he read the reply. Then he pinned a short answer to that one. My dear old friend. Never. Some things cannot be forgotten. Some things cannot be forgiven. Your old friend. Me. The other 2 letters were more enjoyable, especially one. It had been brought by the barn owl and Harry had raised his eyebrow when reading it. Well, at least this one will help me greatly, he whispered to himself. Which one? Another voice asked, and Harry startled and turned, his knife coming to rest on the throat of his friend. Reg, he hissed, you know not to startle me. I could have killed you. Yeah, sure, Reggie answered unconcerned. So, what are you whispering about? An ally, Harry answered. An ally? She knows me from before. And how? Oliver Twist. She knows I have been a little bit obsessed with him back in my days as a professor. And then my way of asking questions, I think that both of it together tipped her off. And now? Nothing, Harry shrugged. She does not know I'm Harry now. All she knows is that I am alive, and I might need her. If I am right, she belongs to one of the families I would have tried to get on my side anyway. It's much easier to do so when she knows me beforehand. And the other letter? This time Harry smirked. Something that might aid my task greatly, he answered. Oh, what? I let you read this letter when you promised me to look into something, Harry said, holding the letter so that Reg could not reach it. Rage stared at the letter, then at Harry. He sighed. What should I do? He asked, still sighing. Harry grinned. I need information about a corridor, he said, and started to describe what he had been dreaming of this night. Just everything you find. Take your time. I am sure we will have it. Reg nodded and Harry handed him the letter. Looking it over, Reg's eyes widened. By Merlin, he said. That sure aids you in your task. Yep, Harry answered, popping the P. And all it took was an innocent letter to a gossip rag. Slytherin. Proud of it, Harry countered, grinning. Now he had just to reply positively. The wheels of something bigger were finally starting to turn faster. A week later, and because of that the last week until Hogwarts would start again, Lucius Abraxas Malfoy, the head of the Malfoy family in Britain, found himself in a situation that definitely wasn't to his benefits. While his house was shielded from the outer world by impressive wards impressive enough that even the Dark Lord had trouble to break them, it now was invaded by Death Eaters and the Dark Lord himself. But that wasn't Lucius's problem. He had after all invited the Dark Lord to use his house as a base for his operations. No, the true problem of one Lucius Abraxas Malfoy, who was currently sitting in his study, looking over papers from the ministry, was the person that suddenly stood inside his study without being invited by him. The person was young. Lucius would have judged him to be not older than his son if the person in front of him hadn't looked at him with eyes as wise as the moon. Black hair was tied back with Slytherin green ribbon in an old-fashioned traditional way. The robes he was wearing were also cut in an older style. They were green with a black tunic and black trousers beneath. Black leather boots and a silver belt, looking as if it was made of silver leaves, added the final touch to his appearance. The boy looked like a young Salazar Slytherin, long before he had met the other founders and built a school. and his icy green eyes did nothing to change this image. A cruel, cold smile was playing over his face, just to settle in an even harder gaze. "Lucius Abrexus, Malfoy, head of the British branch family of Malfoy," he said, and his words had an odd hissing in the background. Lucius shivered and fingered for his wand. "Do not even try, my dear head of the branch family," the boy said softly, and before Lucius could even get a real hold of his wand, the wand was gone, sailing through the air and landing in the right hand of the boy in front of him. This time Lucius gulped and his eyes widened when he was suddenly at the mercy of the stranger. He had heard of wandless magic, but he had never seen it used so casually like it had been used by the boy in front of him. Whoever you are, when you try something you will wish you were never born," the Malfoy head finally hissed. "And now, boy, give me back my—" Pain shot through his whole body, forcing him to shut up. It wasn't like the Cruciatus, but it definitely wasn't pleasant. Like a swat on the bottom and the short moment after, when you could think of nothing but the pain that had erupted from being swatted. "Do never address me as boy again, Lucius Abraxas Malfoy, or I will definitely treat you like the unruly boy you have been acting as for the last 2 decades. The boy hissed and Lucius spluttered. "How dare you? I am the head of the mouth." Again the same pain like before made him shut up. "How dare you?" the boy hissed. "Speaking to your head of house as if you were superior." "Here, head of house?" Lucius Malfoy stared at the boy, then he glanced at the door of his study. Surely someone had heard. "Don't worry," the boy said, smirking. "No one will interrupt or hear us until I have dealt with you." Lucius' eyes snapped to the deathly green eyes of the boy in front of him. After all, the boy continued as if it was normal. "This is a family matter. The family magic of the wards of the manor will hold the secret of our conversation until I, as the head of house, will release it from my hold." In those eerie eyes looking at him, Lucius could see nothing but the truth. There was no aid and no escape until the boy would let him go. Still, Lucius had to try. He sprang up, planning to charge at the boy and disarming the child. Instead he flew back, his back connecting with the back of the chair he had been sitting on when he was forcefully sat down again. "Try again, and I will truly treat you like an unruly child, and swat your bottom until you behave." The boy in front of him hissed, "And I thought as a pure blood and a Malfoy, you would have been raised better. Instead I see a fully grown man in front of me, who does not even feast better than a stubborn 2-year-old toddler. What a disgrace to my family." Lucius blushed, unable to feel anything less but a fool after being chastised by a teenage boy. Then fury overtook him again. "How dare you to treat—" This time he stopped speaking, not because the boy had stopped him like before, but because his eyes fell on the ring the boy was wearing, a signet ring. And not just any signet ring. Lucius paled when he recognized the Malfoy crest. The boy's gaze followed Lucius, and a cruel smile again marred his handsome face. "So you finally saw," he said, still smiling cruelly. "As if I hadn't told you before." The boy snorted and shook his head. "You are truly like a child, Lucius Abraxas Malfoy." Lucius wanted to sneer at the boy, but this time the rules of his father stopped him. Until now Lucius might have acted like the lord of his family, but he definitely wasn't, and maybe never would be, and Lucius had been trained how to act in front of his lord. The boy still seemed to see the suppressed sneer because he sneered at Lucius in return. "Learn to show proper respect, child head of the Malfoy branch," the child said. "And while you're at it, my dear Lucius Abraxas Malfoy, explain to me exactly why I am here." Lucius blinked at these words and looked up again to the cruel smile that marred the boy's face. I do not understand why you came, milord," he answered, this time definitely respectful. Lucius might not know the name of the boy in front of him, but the signet ring showed him all he needed to know. This boy in front of him had his life in his hands. If Lucius would anger him even more, Lucius could lose his place in the family faster than he would like. "You don't?" the boy hissed. "You don't? Then the letter that reached me 2 days ago was all a lie?" "Letter, milord?" "Yes, letter," the boy in front of him hissed. A letter telling me you are using my name and influence to gain the ear of the minister. A letter telling me that you are using money provided for you by my part of the family to finance your lifestyle, and that you are using connections my part of the family built to reach your goals. Tell me, have I been lied to? Lucius paled further and further the more he heard. Hi, me lord, he stuttered, his Slytherin mind working in overdrive to change this situation to his benefit. I would have never done anything like that. Whoever wrote you, do not dare to lie to me. The boy hissed. Do you really believe I have not checked the facts? There are records of your deeds. How dare you to even try to lie to me? This time the boy's fury was nearly visible. It suddenly clung to the walls of Lucius's office, marring the very air with its heavy smell of powerful magic. Lucius shuddered. Lucius stuttered, but he did not know what to say any more. There was just one thing he suddenly saw in his future. He saw himself disinherit and thrown out of the family. He saw himself on the street, not better than the muggles he hated so much, his family magic gone, his wand snapped. Please, milord? I will change my ways. Just one other chance. Please? I beg you, milord, he whispered, while at the same time he tried to return to the pure blood image he had projected for years. The boy looked at him as if he was mudblood. You will not have access to our family fortune anymore until you prove to me you can provide for your own family. You will not vote in my place anymore, but send the material on so that I can vote myself, and you will stop throwing around my name to get what you want to have. The boy hissed. Maybe then, I will let you stay in my family. And with that the boy apparated away, directly through the wards that kept out everyone but family. Lucius shuddered and then buried his head in his hands. What would the Dark Lord say when Lucius was unable to finance him like before? Of course, there was still the dowry of his wife, but that was just a temporary solution at best. Harry softly opened the door of Grimmauld Place and spied in the entrance hall. The hall was empty, so Harry opened the door and stepped in. He closed it softly behind himself. "And where have you been, young man?" a voice said coolly. Harry spun around and saw his godfather standing on the second landing of the stairs. Just on the front step to have a bit of fresh air, you know." Harry answered, guilt clearly showing on his face. "I know I shouldn't have, but—" Sirius sighed, and then winked his godson upstairs. Harry complied, and together they entered the room with the black family tree. Sirius closed the door behind them and then turned back to Harry. "Harry," he said, sighing, I know it's dangerous to leave the house." Harry interrupted him. "But the front step is protected. I did not step further, I promise." Harry saw his godfather searching his face for the truth. "You really did not make another step?" Sirius finally said softly. "Yes, I really did not make another step. If you don't believe me, you can dose me with Veritaserum. I would not answer different," Harry said. "And he wasn't lying after all. You could apparate from the front step and back on it, so he definitely had not stepped any further." "All right," Sirius finally said. "But please, Harry, refrain from even going out to the front step from now on, please." Harry saw that his godfather did not really like playing the responsible adult, but he also saw the fierce protectiveness that shone in the depths of his godfather's eyes. "I will not do it again, I promise," Harry answered. He wouldn't need to. Next week he would be at Hogwarts. He could wait so long with the rest he needed to do. "Thank you." And with that, Harry was again of the hook. Well, at least with Sirius, because for the rest of the holidays, a blue magical eye would follow Harry everywhere. But that Harry did not know. In the same week also, a woman could be seen, looking satisfied at the quibbler in her hands. It was exactly what she had needed to get the investigation started. She knew she had not to wait much longer. Soon there would be enough public protest to press for a trial for Sirius Black. Amelia smiled, and then she started to read the article again. She could not get enough of it. Oh, how she loved it that someone was finally pointing out the problems of their system. The newest edition read, "Dear Editor, the last time you wrote me that there is no trial script of the convicted Sirius Black. Well, This fact got me hooked, and I decided to look into it myself. So I went to the archive in the ministry and researched Mr. Black. I really did not find anything that hints to a trial at all. Not that I was surprised, after all, you told me that there had not been one to begin with, but I still decided to check for myself. I also did not only research the trial script, but everything I found about Mr. Black. I even went so far to search newspaper articles from the time he was arrested. One article I found was especially interesting as it reminded me of something I heard Potter and his friends talking about some time ago. The article stated that Mr. Black killed 13 Muggle and Peter Pettigrew, a friend of the late Potters. It also clearly stated that Mr. Black was found laughing at the crime scene, screaming that he had killed Lily and James Potter. He was arrested and brought to Azkaban right away. At the end of last year I heard Potter and his friends talking, and when I read these sentences I remembered that Harry Potter clearly stated that Peter Pettigrew was the one who slit his arm when he was forced to aid by the rebirth of Lord Voldemort. Of course there is the issue that you-know-who might or might not be back. I do not want to judge who is right. Still, fact is, when Harry Potter really wanted to fabricate a story, why did he include a man who died 14 years ago? Wouldn't including this man make his story more unbelievable as it is? Of course I am no expert in lying, and I do not pretend that I know what Potter is thinking. But I think that every person who is thinking a little bit logically would refrain from mentioning a dead wizard when he wanted his story to be believed. So why did he mention him at all? There is Black on the run. Why using dead Pettigrew? It cannot be the connection to his parents, as they both were friends of the late Potters. And I honestly cannot think of another reason. When he wanted it to be not researchable, he also could have used Mr. Black, as Mr. Black cannot say anything against it. And then there is another fact I cannot understand. The day Sirius Black killed Peter Pettigrew, nothing was left of late Pettigrew except of a finger. I would like to know which curse Mr. Black has been using, as I never heard of a curse like that. I asked my great-grandfather if he knew a curse like that, and all he told me was, I never heard about something like that. There are curses that can reduce a person to ashes or blow them up so that there is nothing left but little pieces of flesh, skin and bones, but letting them vanish except of a finger. No, that I never heard before. He also told me that there are no curses that could even do something like that for an extension. Of course I did not just believe him. So I started to search the library of my family for any course that could do anything like described in the newspaper. Our library is huge and contains hundreds of years of knowledge. Still I found nothing. And really just thinking about it makes me shake my head. When there really was a spell that blew Pettigrew up, then why was his finger found whole? Why wasn't there more damage? A spell like that should have whipped out the whole neighborhood and not just the streets. You don't believe me? Look it up in Mafalda's Basic Knowledge of Magical Theory. Magic is a force. You might be able to concentrate it on one object by extent, but the more force you use, the more wild magic gets loose. There are few wizards that can control wild magic enough to stop it from blowing up everywhere around them. And even if Black was an exceptional wizard, I would dare to say that if his name isn't Dumbledore or you-know-who, he would not be able to just blow up Pettigrew to such an extent without the destruction of the houses nearby. And then there would still be the problem of the finger. The last thing that confuses me at this case is that Mr. Black was never checked if he was bearing the dark mark. Shouldn't that have been the first thing to do? And don't tell me we were at war. There was plenty of time to lift a sleeve and look at the skin beneath it. The dark mark cannot be missed. So why was he just chucked into Azkaban? Of course there is still the problem of Mr. Black naming himself as the villain, but even that is an occurrence that can be found elsewhere. In the Muggle world they know of a syndrome that would explain Mr. Black's yelling that he is guilty in killing James and Lily Potter. It's called the Survivor Syndrome. Just think about it like that. An Auror and his partner, who is a close friend, checking houses for Death Eaters. The Auror is in charge and he tells his partner to check this house while he checks the next. So when the partner dies because in the house he was checking were Death Eaters, the surviving Auror will feel guilty because he told his partner and friend to do it. He will blame himself for the death of his friend, even if he hasn't killed his friend himself. Now exchange Sirius Black with the aura. Sirius Black tells the Potters to do something, and they die. Pettigrew might be involved in the death of the Potters somehow, as he is a follower of you-know-who. I am just filling in maybe facts that fit. I am by no means telling you that it was like that. So he goes after Pettigrew. He tries to kill the traitor but is tricked by said one. That is, laughing and telling the auras that he killed Lily and James Potter would be a final result of the pressure of guilt and the inability to get revenge. Would he have been brought to St. Mungo's and would have gotten a calming draft? He might have been able to explain fully what truly had happened. Of course, I do not say that it was like that. This is merely a likely construct of an otherwise confusing story. I am sorry if I started to rant, but I could not hold it in anymore after I found out all this stuff. Oliver Twist. Zeno Lovegood's answer was printed beneath, and even Amelia could conclude that the editor-in-chief of the Quibbler had been hooked by the young man who questioned everything. Amelia asked herself how much more were looking at the texts, while hoping that Oliver Twist would not stop to write, simply because there finally was someone that asked some questions, or simply because the articles made an interesting reading. Dear Mr. Twist, I was really impressed by your reasoning. I went to Flourish and Blots to confirm the things you wrote with Mafalda's basic knowledge of magical theory. Your explanation really fits exactly what the author is describing. I also confirmed in the Muggle world your theory with the guilty feeling of Mr. Black. It is really fascinating what the Muggles have been researching. I was impressed with the depths of their knowledge of things we never have considered until now. Well, back to the facts. You are not the only one who heard Harry Potter talking about dead Peter Pettigrew as if he was alive. My daughter also confirmed this fact with me, and I am sure there are others as well that heard him. Your reasoning that Mr. Potter would have searched for a more believable man if he really wanted to believe is sound. So, why did he use Peter Pettigrew and not Sirius Black? The only explanation I could come up with would be that Mr. Potter was telling the truth, and it really had been Peter Pettigrew. So that would make you-know-who's return also more likable, and at the same time it would change the truth of the events of 14 years ago. But sadly it is not the journalist's place to find out the truth, it's the auras. All we can do is point them the way. Let's hope it's enough to let them look in this case again. I do not want to have an innocent prisoner in Azkaban, or even kissed. That would simply be horrible. Xenophilius Lovegood, editor of the Quibbler. Finally Amelia put aside the newspaper and returned to her normal work. She had not even really started when there was a knock on her door. She smiled and called the person in. It really didn't take all that long for Fudge to turn up. Amelia, Fudge said while storming in. I want you to get a trial for Black. I want the evidence of his guilt to be public knowledge. Do it. Now. Excuse me? Amelia asked with a raised eyebrow while holding back a smile. I am swamped with howlers. I want it to stop, so you go and start up a trial. I want him to be judged publicly. And do it now, understood? There might be a chance that Black really isn't guilty at all, Minister. Amelia replied. The Minister just snorted. He is. Don't worry. Dumbledore told me himself all these years ago. Just find the evidence and present it at the trial. And with that Fudge left again. Amelia leaned back in her chair. Finally. Now she had just to find out the truth. At another place at the same time, an edition of the Quibbler was thrown on a desk. Albus Dumbledore was not pleased with Oliver Twist. Of course, Albus could not protest that it was long over time that Sirius Black got a trial. The problem was that the clearing of Sirius' name wouldn't suit Albus's plans at all. Albus needed Harry to live at his relatives. He needed his hero ready to eventually die for the greater good. Of course, Albus did not want Harry to die. The young boy had still a life ahead of him and he should be able to live it. But Harry had also the responsibility to destroy Voldemort once and for all. And when Albus had to choose between the life of one child and the lives of thousands, he would take the child's life. And there also is the problem that occurred on the trial day, Albus thought. He still wasn't sure how Harry had found out about the laws and all. Hermione hadn't helped him, and that he had found out by himself was unlikely. The problem was that Albus could just find one reasonable explanation. Harry had either access to Voldemort's memories, or the Horcrux in Harry had started to possess the boy. Both explanations would not do well for Albus's plans. Well, I have to watch him when he returns to Hogwarts, Albus thought. When the teen was really loosing against the Dark Lord, Albus would prefer to kill the teen himself. Then, having a teenage mini-Voldemort living at Hogwarts, we still have time, and maybe there is a way to stop the connection between those two. Albus thought. He needed Harry intact to do what he needed to do. The only question was if Harry really needed to learn the arts of the mind. Albus would prefer to not teach the boy. He was not sure how it would end when he was unable to read the thoughts of the boy anymore. After all, Harry and Voldemort had shared some major points in their early lives. Albus feared that Harry would finally fall in the same darkness Voldemort once had fallen into, and they really didn't need another Dark Lord at their hands. Somewhere else, an ex-prisoner of Azkaban was writing hurriedly a letter to the director of law enforcement, one Amelia Bones. Normally this ex-prisoner of Azkaban would not even have bothered with a letter like that. He was not one of the logical kind, so he never had thought of a way to present his own story. Instead, he was one of the hands-on guys, and he would have preferred to get out of his hiding place to search for the traitorous rat and then kill it. He had never thought to take a legal way to get himself cleared. So when the article had come out in the Witches' Weekly and the Quibbler, Sirius Black just had stared at it, not comprehending and not doing anything. It had been on his godson's advice, after his godson had cuffed him 1 or 2 times around his head, that Sirius Black finally had contacted Gringotts as a neutral go-between and then started to write his letter to Amelia Bones, filled with his side of the story. Of course, the chances that he was really granted a trial were still unbelievable slim, but his godson had told him that he had to try. Of course, Sirius Black, being Sirius Black, had a very unusual first reaction after his godson had told him to try to get his name cleared. When his godson had told him to do it, Sirius Black had stood up from the kitchen chair he had been sitting on and had walked to the door, taking down his old travel cloak while going. "What in fire and wind's name are you doing?" Harry cried when Sirius Black opened the front door while putting on his cloak. "I'm going to the ministry to tell them I am not guilty," Sirius answered with a confused expression in his face. "That was what you wanted me to do after all." Harry face-palmed. Then he strode with purpose to his godfather and cuffed him around the head for the 3rd time this evening. "Are you insane, you stupid Gryffindor?" Harry hissed. "What by earth and water are you thinking? Or aren't you thinking at all, because the space between your ears is actually empty?" Sirius just stared at Harry for a moment, before he slowly blinked and then muttered, "That was creepy, Harry. For a moment I thought you were channeling Snape." Harry just cuffed him around his head for the 4th time that day. "If I am able to stop you by sounding like Snape, so be it." He at least wouldn't have run headfirst into danger without even stopping to think beforehand. "That's cruel, Harry." This time Sirius Black sounded as if he was whining. "Absolutely cruel. How can you even think of comparing me to Snape of all people?" "If it works," Harry replied, and then stirred his godfather back into the kitchen, silently praying that Sirius would not notice that his mother had unexplainably stayed silent while they had been talking in the entrance hall. Harry was lucky. Sirius did not notice. Instead, he was forced by his godson to write a letter to Amelia Bones, explaining his side of the story. He was also forced to contact the goblins so that Gringotts could act as a neutral ground between the two parties. There was, after all, still the kissed by a Dementor on-site warrant for Sirius out there, and that definitely wasn't safe for the ex-convict. And so Sirius was sitting at the table, writing down his statement of the events 14 years ago, while he was watched by his godson. Neither of them were aware of the blue magical eye and the connected ears that had followed their whole conversation since Harry had purposed to Sirius to do something to get cleared by himself. And different than Sirius, the ears that had followed their conversation were sharp enough to pick out the feeling of wrongness in the silence of the entrance hall. The magical eye instead noticed the boy stopping before he entered the kitchen, the boy's eyes on the silent portrait on the wall. A tiny nod was addressed to said portrait, and then the kitchen door closed again, shielding the inhabitants from the normally shrieking voice of the quiet portrait. Interesting. The owner of the blue eye said, definitely interesting. Past timeline somewhere in year 900 AD. The village was burning. The day had begun like every day since the end of the Goblin Wars, after the peace treaty. Sal had left the goblins to wander again. Anastasius instead had opted to stay a little bit longer, and Sal had let him be, because he knew that Anastasius loved to work in the archives. Sal, on the other side, was planning to go abroad, but until now he hadn't decided where he wanted to go exactly. He was not really sure if he wanted to see China again or if he would like to travel south. Maybe Africa was an option, but his plans were put on hold when he saw the dense smoke above the trees. So instead of following his plans and going to the coast, he changed directions to where the smoke polluted the air, finding a burning village. He stared at it, scrutinizing it with his eyes. He had learned long ago that storming into a situation without knowing what to deal with was not the brightest way of action. So he activated his basilisk vision. Using it was magically draining, as every kind of firbolg magic he could utilize, and especially draining was to activate his heat sight without opening his second eyelids. But he had to. He could not kill innocents just because he was unfortunately looking at them at the moment. First he could see nothing but smoke, then figures materialized in the thick smolder, running through it, crying, screaming and shouting. Sal's basilisk vision showed that the most of the villagers seemed assembled in the middle, probably on the marketplace of the village. Which was odd. Why should they assemble there while their huts were burning? Sal crept nearer, entering the village, while casting a silent illusion and fireproof spell on himself. He followed his basilisk vision, which showed him the silhouettes of the villagers, even if it was slightly hindered by the warmth of the fire itself, and went to the marketplace. There he found the villagers, huddled together with the crying children behind their parents' legs. The outer circle were solely men, behind them the women with fear in their eyes, but determined, and then the children and wounded. The men had reaping hooks, axes and rakes in their hands. Weapons. The only weapons a common mundane had, and that they were mundanes. A mundane village, fighting for its life. The opponents were big, burly fellows, armed with axes, swords and other real weapons, nothing makeshift like the villager ones. Sal knew the garbs the invaders were wearing. He had worn some of these clothes a long time ago, even if that had been long before he had entered Britain again. Vikings. Vikings out for prey, and the villagers had found themselves in their carefully knotted net, unable to flee. Sal sighed. He knew that this time he would not be able to just butt in and come out alive. Even if the Vikings might not have brought a magician, they rarely did when being on the prowl, they would not be as easily intimidated like the sorcerers he had crossed 100 years before. Sal looked again at the villagers, this time finding a man on the front row holding a wooden stick in his hands. A sorcerer. The man had apparently a broken leg and a very bad-looking head injury. Maybe he also had some broken ribs or some internal injury. Sal could guess as much because of the carefully reduced movements he made. Just analyzing the man led to Sal shaking his head in dismay. Reckless. Sal mused, stiffing a sigh while deciding on a course of action. Absolutely reckless. Even Anastasius would have thought first, even just for a moment, before running head-on in this kind of situation, and by wind and fire this boy is the most reckless person I ever met in the last 1,000 years. Or he was. This man definitely looks as if he has gotten head-on in this fight without thinking and getting the worst of it. Then he put aside his thoughts and returned to the current situation. He had a good idea how to frighten the Viking. The only problem would be the villagers. They also would be frightened by him, but with this absolutely fearless and maybe a little idiotic sorcerer in their front row. Sal stepped out of his hiding place, lifting the illusion charm while doing so. His long black cloak started to shimmer, flogging out in black fog. He had put up his hood, shadowing his face while enchanting his green eyes to glow out of the dark beneath his hood. His long staff, previously shrunk, and in his staff holster, now in his left hand, the old wood glowing with silver runes. His cloak was open in the front, showing gleaming daggers and knives, and the potions and poisons he carried on his silver belt, made out of dozens of silver leaves. His tunic was also black, seamed and embroidered with emerald green, showing a hissing basilisk ready to strike. Of course, the most of the intimidation clothes were transfigured, but even a Viking magician would have trouble to undo Sal's spelling. The only disadvantage was that the spells Sal had used definitely belonged to the more draining ones, as they were born out of his mother tongue, Parseltongue. Not that Sal knew any other spells that could accomplish something like that. Sal's staff was not made to aid Sal in his everyday spells, and because of this, his spells normally needed another magical backing. Parseltongue was one of those, runes another. But runes could not be used for something like transfiguration of clothes. But at least a transfiguration in Parseltongue had the side effect that it not only looked real, but also intimidated a little without too much magical backing. "Who?" Sal whispered in a husky voice which was enchanted to carry his words far beyond the fire, echoing from every corner of the village. "Who has dared to wake me in my sleep?" The scene in front of him froze. The Viking turned to Sal, looking him over with unsure eyes. Sal smirked inwardly. "You," he said, looking at one of the Viking while using a more ancient tongue of the north, still understandable for the Viking but nevertheless foreign-sounding. "Is it you?" And while saying this, a single rune was sent to the Viking, who toppled over, suddenly covered in blood. Sal had not hurt him deeply, it were minor wounds, but hurting the Viking wasn't Sal's goal. Scaring them was. "It is you," he hissed in Norse, letting in his voice the sound of the basilisk. "But it isn't you alone." His blasting eyes looking at the Viking next to the wounded. This time he didn't hold back. Without hesitating, he opened his second eyelids, killing the Viking on the spot. Draining for Sal, but absolutely terrifying for those that saw it. "You trampled on my mother's grave," he hissed while sending a rune to the Viking on the other side of the wounded. This one screamed when his hands suddenly blistered as if he had held them in the flames dancing around Sal. "You," he said, looking at the screaming Viking, his clear eyelids in place and closed again. "You destroyed my brother's urn." Now panic broke loose in the rows of the Viking. Sal knew what they saw. They had seen his power, and without a magician on their own side, they interpreted his actions the only way they could, as the actions of one of the Jotnar, disrupted while having a life on the earth. And the Jotnar were a monster when angered. They might not always be declared as evil in Norse mythology, but they also weren't always the good guys. And Sal played with their fears, standing up to his full high, letting his eyes blast with anger. "I will not show mercy with those who have wronged me," he hissed, his voice rough and icy. "You will perish for your deeds." His staff lit with light as bright as the sun, bathing the fire-stricken village in evil-looking shadows, showing ghostly, non-existent creatures creeping through the flames, searching, hunting. Another one of the Viking was felled by Sal's deadly green gaze, and suddenly the Viking fled. Some of them even threw away his weapons just to get away even faster. Others bowed to Sal and lay down their booty to soothe his wrath before also turning around, fleeing. Within minutes the village was empty of Vikings. Sal said nothing, his gaze still lingering on the villagers. He saw them shiver, eyes still filled with fear. Even the sorcerer seemed affected by Sal's performance. Sal sighed, then he stepped fully out of the flames. He looked at the still burning village. He knew they had to put out the fire, but he could not do it alone, so he turned back to the villagers while cancelling the charms he had put on his hood and eyes. He felt a little bit light-headed. Using rune-based magic was definitely less draining than using magic without a real focus. It were times like that that let Sal wish for the wand he had once carried, even if it was 1,000 years since he last had it in his hand. Then he pushed his hood down, showing his human face. "I will need help to put out the fire," he said casually. The sorcerer stared at him, his eyes big as saucers, and then his barking laughter filled the air. You aren't a demon," he said, still laughing a little hysterically with painful gasps sprinkled in his laughter. Sal snorted. "Of course not," he said. but I somehow had to trick them to get them away. I am by no means strong enough to take them all on and come out alive." The sorcerer laughed again, but his laughter had also another good thing. The villagers relaxed slightly. "How?" the sorcerer asked. "Later," Sal said. "The fire first. And then the wounded, even you, Mr. Reckless Dunderhead Sorcerer," Sal thought, but said nothing more. "Of course," the sorcerer said, turning to the cottages and started to water them. "Sal, let him be." He himself bent down to his knees, writing runes in the earth. He intellectually knew that using a ritual for putting out the fire would use up more of his rapidly decreasing magical resources, but it was rune work, and because of that not as draining as the other things Sal had done before. "Next time give me 1,000 stasis runes." Sal grumbled to himself soundlessly, "but not something like that again. I am sure I would feel better with them than now." Not that using runes did not eat on his magical reserves. The villagers, still wary of him, also turned to help with the fire, but some of them stayed near Sal watching him, protecting the wounded and toddlers who couldn't help. One of the eldest even crept near Sal and looked down on his work. Finally he asked, "What are you doing, lad?" Stopping slightly before using lad to address Sal. "Shouldn't you also help putting out the fire?" "I do," Sal said calmly. "I am a sorcerer, him." He gestured to the other sorcerer, slightly unsure how they called sorcerers these days. "You mean a lord gifted by the gods?" the old man asked. "Yes," Sal smiled slightly at the description. The old man used for the other sorcerer. "You have no wand to channel your gift." The old man said, "I don't," Sal said, not bothering to say that his staff and the wand the sorcerer was using were basically the same. Not that they worked the same. His staff could not aid him in charms or transfigurations, but was solely there for rituals and rune drawings. Still, it was the same somehow. "I am a gifted lord, but my kind is called a druid." Sal wasn't sure if the mundane still had this term. They were starting to be Christianized after all. Maybe a druid was now a demon. Sal couldn't know. He had been too engaged in the war between sorcerers and goblin to have to do much with mundane. "A druid?" the old man asked. "One of the old almighty healers." "Almighty, well, at least he wasn't a demon." "Yes, even if I am not almighty," he finally said, "and because I am different than him," he nodded to where the sorcerer was putting out the fire. "I have to do things differently." "So you aren't one of the true druids?" the old man concluded after Sal denied the Almighty. "My father was a druid," Sal said, taking a different approach. "He died a long time ago. All I know about the way of the druids I know from him." When he said that, the old man nodded knowingly. "You were too young when he died, so you are now a druid but aren't almighty because you could not learn all of the druid's way." Well, at least the man had accepted Sal as a druid who wasn't almighty. "Something like that," Sal said and stood up. Then he picked up his staff to send magic through the drawn runes on the ground. They lit up with golden sparkles and vanished, building ritual circles around the still burning houses. Sal powered them with his magic, and blue shields suddenly surrounded the fires, putting it out by stealing it the oxygen. "Impressive," the sorcerer rasped. Coming over to where Sal was standing, he had conjured himself a walking stick on which he was leaning himself heavily. Sal snorted. "It is more impressive that you can still walk," he answered in return. "Everyone else with your injuries would be lying flat, or even dead on the ground." The other sorcerer shrugged. "I don't think you know enough about injuries to diagnose that," he answered nonchalant while taking breaths that were filled with his pain. At that Sal raised an eyebrow. Reckless dunderhead, he thought. Definitely worse than Anastasius. Far worse than Anastasius. "I am a healer, master sorcerer," he said with a still raised eyebrow. "I am sure I am able to distinguish between a lethal wound and a minor injury." The other one stared at him, surprise clearly visible on his face. "Does that mean that by all people who could have helped me, a healer did, someone who could not battle even for his life?" Searle snorted at this, but decided not to protest. He had other things to do now. "Lie down," he said sternly. "You can sulk later. After I healed you. But the other one started. Sal made a rough gesture with his hand, and the suborned sorcerer found himself toppling over when his cane suddenly vanished. Sal caught him before he fell and helped him to lie down. There we go, he said lightly, as if nothing happened. I knew you were clever enough to follow my advice. The other sorcerer growled. Sal smiled at him and flicked his staff. The colorful net that expanded over the injured sorcerer told Sal everything he needed to know. Normal sorcerers were unable to understand the swirling patterns and colorful clusters that spread in a cupola over the body of the injured sorcerer, but Sal had invented the cupola, so he knew exactly what he saw. He did not like what the cupola had to say about his patient. Said sorcerer looked at the net with curious eyes. What is that? He asked. A spell to show me where you were injured. Sal replied while reading the runes and hieroglyphs that flowed along the colorful lines. You can read that? The other sorcerer asked, impressed. It is my spell, of course I can, Sal answered, rolling his eyes. And you are in a very sorry shape. I am impressed that you have managed not to bleed to death until now. And he really was. A normal person would not have stood up after receiving such injuries. The other sorcerer had a heavy concussion. Several cracked ribs, one of them even puncturing the lung, internal bleeding from several other wounds, a knife wound in the stomach, and the predicted broken leg. Every normal person just would have laid down and died. How the hell had this dunderhead managed to stand until now, not even talking about doing magic or walking? So, is it bad? The sorcerer asked. When you wouldn't still talk, I'd say you're dead, Sal answered dryly. As you are still talking, how about saying goodbye? The other sorcerer stayed for a moment silent after that. So there is nothing you can do for me anymore? He finally asked. Sal snorted. I will try, he answered, rolling his eyes again. Just don't ask for a miracle. You might survive, but I will not predict in what state you will be afterward. Sure, try your worst, the sorcerer answered. Nothing lost when you don't succeed, is there? I am dying anyway, and I am here again to try to do a miracle. Why is it just always me? Sal groaned inwardly. That seemed exactly like the last time. The only difference was that the injured one was an adult sorcerer, and his injuries were even grave than the goblin boy's. It was just Salvazar's luck that had brought him here. Sal sighed, then he scribbled new runes in the earth and conjured a stone bed. How bad are the other villagers injured? He asked the old man. Except of the dead, it seems nothing grave, the man answered, and the more injured ones are treated by our healer. Sal looked back to the wounded. De facto, there was an old woman there, treating them. Sal decided that that would have to be enough for now and returned to his runic circle. What is this? The old man asked, looking at the carvings etched in the ground. A runic circle, Sal said. I need it for my healing. Our healer doesn't need something like that, the old man said skeptically. Your healer isn't trying to beg death to leave a man alive, Sal answered while flowing the now ashen-faced sorcerer on the stone bed. He does not look like he is dying, the old man said. He is wearing his clothes over his fatal injuries, Sal answered. He may not look like it, but I can see death lingering in his shadows. Sal knew he was playing with superstition, but he was not interested to fully explain the injuries the sorcerer had got, especially after it seemed now like said man had stopped living on adrenaline alone and was succumbing to his lethal wounds. I hate healing dunderheads like him, Sal muttered, but entered the circle. Don't enter, you will be at death's mercy if you do, he told the man. I will not, the man hastily assured, and I will stop anyone else from entering too. That would be appreciated, Sal answered. Of course he had erected a runic shield to prevent anyone from entering, but it would save his energy if no one would even try, and energy he would need. Putting out the fire had been tiresome as he had depleted his magic severely beforehand, just to create the illusions and transfigurations without having a focus like the wand he once used to have. Healing these injuries would deplete his magic to the very basics. He would not really be able to stomach more. Of course, nothing had to be simple with the sorcerer he was healing now. After Sal had closed the circle and started the stasis, vanished the sorcerer's clothes. just to get alert a minute later that the heart of the sorcerer decided to stop. So much for stasis. Sal cursed in Parseltongue. You just had to go and give me even more work. Of course the sorcerer didn't answer. Sal conjured a bowl and filled it with water, which he sterilized and heated with a spell from his water bottle, spelled his hands clean and disinfected, and then called his Thunderbird power. A lightning shot from his palm, which was lying on the chest of the sorcerer, a lightning based on magic Sal had not want to spend. Like Phoenix tears and the heat sight of the basilisk without opening his eyelids, it was one of his family magics, and utterly draining. Electricity flowed through the body of the injured, letting him twist, not that he noticed, unconscious as he was, and made his heart beat once more. Then it stopped again and Sal cursed. With his left hand he called the colored net again. Great, he thought. He has lost too much blood. Putting down the rucksack he was carrying beneath his cloak, he opened it and took out his potion kit. Without trying to look through it manually, he summoned a blood-replacing potion and some others. One to let his patients for a few hours fall into a magical coma, and the other to stabilize the functions of the internal organs. With his other hand he carefully extracted one of his knives. Letting it go mid-air so that it flew with magic alone, he conjured a flame and sterilized it. Then he coaxed the unconscious sorcerer to drink the potions, and after that shocked the heart again. It stuttered, 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 and then started to beat regularly again. First crisis prevented, Sal muttered and righted his knife on the chest of the sorcerer. Sal took a deep breath, activated some concealing runes, and checked the sterilizing ones. Then he cut, opened the torso of the sorcerer, and carefully looked at the wounds he found. He felt himself getting sick. Until now he had seldom opened the chest of another being to treat its injuries manually. It was his last resort, but he knew he was unable to treat this time what he did not see. He could miss something grave when doing it blindly. Memo to myself: find a spell to look in a body without having to open it. Salvazasher murmured silently in Simreg, while starting to clean the open chest from blood. He looked at the injuries the sorcerer and fetched 2 of his herbs, letting them absent-minded fall into the hot water bowl he had conjured before. Then he spelled his hands wordlessly clean again and started to touch the single organs. The net over the sorcerer changed, so that it showed him the injuries of the touched organ instead the injuries of the whole body. With careful fingers he drew runes and hieroglyphs on the single organs, let drops of potion fall and mended them with spells. It was a tiring work, and Salvazasher hated it, even more today because he was starting to feel the effects of his previous spells now. He shut out the pain when his body began to ache after he had drawn runes on the ankles, wrists and forehead of the sorcerer. Then he cut his own wrists to use his blood for drawing other runes on the body of the sorcerer. The runes glowed and faded. They would help the sorcerer to heal as soon as Sal finished the ritual. Now came the next critical part. He took the bowl of herb tea and washed the organs in the healing lotion until they were healed again. Then he mended the broken ribs. The lung, however, was something no potion or spell in the world could mend. There was just one thing Sal could do. He cried. His tears were dropping on the lung, mending it like every phoenix tears in the world would do. He felt his magic draining when he healed with his tears. Even if his abilities were inherited, it was still his magic that had to support them. I will hunt you down in afterlife if you even think of dying, Sal threatened. I hate depleting my magic like that. If it is for nothing, you will forever regret dying. He knew he was uttering an empty threat, but he did it anyway. Somehow he had to let out his frustration with this lucky idiot sorcerer. He checked on the whole body again and sighed. The worst was mended. There was no sign of a deadly injury anymore. The concussion was getting better thanks to the blood runes Sal had painted with his own blood on the sorcerer's forehead, and even if his leg was still broken, the first signs of infection it had previously vanished. Now he just had to close the torso again. Sal mended the sternum he had to break to be able to treat the lungs. After that he looked his work over again. Nothing was out of place. All was healed. He carefully mended the layers of muscles until he felt his magic acting up. After that he simply conjured a needle and disinfected it before stitching the rest of the open skin, the skin he had cut himself and the skin the other knife had cut. Luckily the other knife hadn't been poisoned. Sal wasn't sure if he would have been able to rescue the life of the sorcerer if it had been. Finally he corrected the positions of the leg bones and stabilized it with a simple wood bandage construction. He would later mend it as soon as he had enough magic to do it. Sal swayed, feeling absolutely exhausted. He destroyed the ritual circle and saw how the lines and finally the stone bed vanished, leaving the sorcerer lying on the floor. Then he simply toppled over and lost conscious. When Sal woke up again he was still lying on the ground, but now a blanket was on top of him. "How are you?" a voice asked, and Sal's gaze shifted to look at the person who had spoken. It was the sorcerer he had been tending. The sorcerer was sitting next to him, also a blanket over his knees. "You did not move around?" Sal asked, anxious. "The healer forbid," the sorcerer answered, grumbling. "She said that if I even dare to leave this place, she would bind me like a dog with a lash." Sal sighed, relieved. "You could have made my work undone if you did," he sighed, and suddenly the sorcerer looked guilty. "Oh," he said, stuttering. "I thought, since you used magic to heal me, or that's what the others told me, even magic cannot heal fatal injuries like yours without time," Sal answered, feeling still exhausted. The sorcerer looked at him with an unreadable expression. "You still look like a ghost," he finally commented. "Healing people with a ritual like I did is extremely exhausting," Sal answered. "I had to depend solely on my own magic with it. Normally a sorcerer can use some outer magic to help his own, like the magic your wand contains, but in a ritual like that it's just your magic, your soul, and your blood. You can use his herbs and potions and spells, but they all depend on your own magic. They can support it, but it's nothing like using a wand." He said nothing about the drain his magic had suffered long before he even started healing. It would not do any good to tell a man who still could turn out to be a foe about his weaknesses. "Ritual," the sorcerer uttered. "So it was dark magic that rescued my life?" He did sound like he didn't know how to feel about that. "No," Sal answered. "Dark magic is something totally different. You said you used your blood. That is dark magic for me. I also used my tears and my hands," Sal said, rolling with his eyes. "They are also part of my body. Is using them also dark magic? Blood contains the very essence of our magic. It is line theft to even try to use another sorcerer one's, or when you change it. Your own blood did not change when I used my blood on you," Sal said tiredly. "Your body might contain a little bit of my magic for the next few weeks, but after that it's all back to normal. There is no constant harm done. But rituals." "It was a healing ritual," Sal interrupted grumpily. "I am a druid. I never learned much wand-waving. I cannot use a wand to heal. Rituals are the only way I know." "Stop," the sorcerer said, astonished. "What do you mean, rituals are the only way you know? Did your parents never teach you to use a wand? Did they never teach you that reading the old ritual text and trying to use them will lead you on the path of evil?" "On the path of evil?" Sal asked, confused. "Everyone knows," the sorcerer answered, eyes big like saucers. "When you try to do the old rituals you will lose your mind." And suddenly the puzzle in Sal's mind solved itself. "You have still texts of the druids?" he asked. "Of course," the sorcerer answered, "but no one is allowed to use them, because no one has the protection anymore to use them correctly." Sal filled in absent-minded. "Protection?" The sorcerer sounded confused. "The first thing a druid does is learning his protection," Sal answered. "Without the protection, a druid is unable to control the magic of the ritual and finally loses his mind." "Protection?" the sorcerer said again, now astonished. "There is a protection before using a ritual?" "There is," Sal answered. "It's a constant protection every druid has for his whole life. A druid does start on it as soon as his magic has matured the first time. He must have at least the second layer until he matures the second time. When he doesn't, he will never be able to be a druid." "Protection." This time the sorcerer shook his head. "How come you know of something like that when everyone else doesn't?" Sal shrugged. My father taught me, he answered. I finished my full protection when I turned 18, still before I matured the second time, so using a ritual for me is safe. I will not lose my mind, and I will not turn dark except I do it voluntarily. So, you simply can use all the rituals in the books? The sorcerer asked. I don't know, Sal finally answered. I have some books from my father and mother, but the most rituals I know I have never written down, and I also don't think father has ever thought of it. So, these rituals just exist in your head? The sorcerer asked, astonished. Well, I can hardly check the books every time I need to use them. Sometimes there are life-threatening situations like yours. You would have died if I would have had to check books first. Sal answered, not sure what was so unbelievable. But some of the rituals are really complicated. How can you remember all that? Now it was Sal staring at him. How would you know that? I have some texts at Gringotts, he answered finally. They are family heirlooms, but my sister and I decided to put them away so that no one would consider using them. Now Sal was really interested. You have a vault at Gringotts? He asked. He knew that the Goblin Bank did not deal with sorcerers. So how... yes, something to do with family, the sorcerer answered nervously, cautiously. I know sorcerers normally doesn't, but, well, my family is the only one allowed. Something to do with how did the goblins put it after we aided them and got permission for a vault? Our clan leader? Clan leader? Of course Sal knew what a clan leader was. It was the leader of a goblin family, similar to the lord and head of house in sorcerer families. But normally a head of house was not accepted as a clan leader by the goblins, and sorcerers did not get vaults unless— You're a Lafay, Sal said, understanding. He was the clan leader of the Lafay family in the eyes of the goblins. He himself had a vault, and of course no goblin would make a fuss when a family member of a clan leader also wanted one. Yes, the sorcerer answered. Godric Lafay at your and your family's service. Also, even if I don't understand what my last name has to do with a Gringotts vault. Everything, Sal answered. You're a member of Morganata's family. As such you belong to the clans, and all members of the clans are allowed to have a vault in Gringotts. A member of Morganed's family? Godric asked. Who by midden is Morganed? Sal stared at Godric. By Merlin. They were using his father's name to swear. It was odd. Absolutely odd. Of course, Sal also once had said by Merlin, but that was long ago. Hearing it again, even if his father's name was still Merlin, was definitely strange for him. Well, Sal did not really know what he should answer to Godric's question. Should he simply say, I am Morgani? Morgana, that's the goblin name of your clan leader, he finally said. Phew? But isn't the clan leader something like a head of the house? Godric asked. Yes. So shouldn't the head of the house be the clan leader? Well, that's complicated, Sal finally said. He is Morgana's heir, but he isn't yet the head of the house. Oh, I know that, Godric answered and showed Sal a ring he had just once seen before. Look, I am the head of the house, so there is no way he could be. Sal stared at the ring. So you are not only a member of the family, you're the head, he stated, still looking at the ring. So this was one of his ancestors. Yes, Godric said, and his death-green eyes met Sal's. But you still haven't said who you are. Sal blushed. Forgive me, he said, fighting the blush. I was just stunned that you're a Lafay, and I forgot. I am Salazar Emrys, at your service. Salazar Emrys, as in Medid Emrys? Godric asked, astonished and now eyeing Sal critically. Yes. Sal finally said, he is my— He stopped. He could not say father, because Godric would not believe him, but he also could not say ancestor because it simply felt wrong. I mean he was a relative. He finally changed his sentence. Relative? Godric asked, grinning. The right word would be ancestor, my friend. When you think so. Sal answered, shrugging. And my name is Salvasar, not Salazar. Godric just waved at the correction. In that moment the old healer reached them. So you are awake, she said to Sal. Sal nodded and said, It was tiresome to rescue him while he pointed at Godric. So I believe, the old woman answered, looking Sal over critically. When I was young, I once saw a young man just like you. He rescued my sister after she was wounded by a bear. It was by chance that he came by to rescue her. He came from a battlefield, his clothes ripped, he himself bloody and tired, but as soon as he found my sister, he did all he could to rescue her. She told them. Did he do it? Godric asked, interested. Yes, the old woman said, and he was the first who taught me about healing, and with that she looked back at Sal, who blushed again. He could remember the incident, even if he would have never combined the old healer with the scared little girl from that time. When he blushed, she smiled and Sal knew he was busted. He shook his head and glanced at Godric. She also glanced at him and nodded shortly. I was never able to thank him for rescuing her, though, she continued. Still staring at Sal, he smiled. I am sure he knows how you feel, he answered. And I am sure he appreciates what you are doing for me. I did nothing for you, the old woman said, still smiling. Oh, you did? Sal answered. You stopped a dunderhead from standing up while I was unconscious. That's definitely help enough. Well, I remembered that he did not let my sister stand up for another day, and the wounds of my sister were less life-threatening than Godric's. And with that she stared Godric down, who got as red as a tomato. You know, I was on my way to my sister and my fiancé, he said with puppy dog eyes. I promised them to reach them this week. I had not planned to get to be Viking prey on the way there. You were not Viking prey, as you put it, the old woman said fondly. You had left us already when the Viking arrived. You just returned here to help us, and let me guess, he ran straight in the battle. Sal said, raising an eyebrow. That he did, the old woman answered, smiling. There is a reason why everyone calls him Gryffindor. Sal nearly chocked on the air. Excuse me, he asked, staring at Godric. The other sorcerer shrugged. You know Gryffindor, like Gift of the Griffin. They named me that after I, trickled a dragon, he answered. Sal just stared. How gets one called Gift of the Griffin after trickling a dragon, and how come anyone gets the idea to even trickle a dragon? Well, that's a long story, Godric said. The short version is that I had a bet with my sister's fiancé, Peveril Grimm, even if he wasn't her fiancé at that time. So I went to trickle the dragon, and when the dragon woke, I would have been dead if there hadn't been this griffin, and I think it wanted the gold of the dragon for itself, or something like that. And the result is that I got away and also brought some treasures with me. Since then all villagers around here call me Gryffindor, because the griffin gave me the gift to live a little bit longer. Aha, Sal said, and then shook his head. All right, you have just proven me that you are definitely mentally ill. I told you it was a bet, Godric said, sulking, and I was 11 winters old. I was young, stupid, and reckless. Well, congratulations. Yet you are just stupid and reckless. You have improved, Sal snorted, and the old woman laughed. Godric is a good lad, she said. But you are right, stranger. He is reckless. His name is Salazar, auntie, Godric piped in. I am sure you are allowed calling him that. Sal wanted to insist that his name was not Salazar, but after he corrected Godric 3 days in a row, he just gave up. It was like Godric did not want to listen. Finally, a week later, Godric was well enough to travel. He was grumpy and insisted that his sister and his betrothed would kill him for coming too late, but Sal was firm, and so Godric stayed until his wounds had healed. So, where are you going now, Salazar? Godric asked while packing his stuff. Sal just shrugged. I don't know, he answered. I hadn't decided when I stopped by to rescue you. So you have nowhere to go? Sal just shrugged again. I don't, he answered. What's with your family? Aren't they gonna miss you? I don't have family anymore. Well then, how about traveling with me until you know where you want to go? Sal just hesitated one moment. Then he said, It would be better. Who knows what you would do next when left alone? And it was this decision that would fix his coming way for the next decades. On the way to Godric's betrothed, Sal learned a lot about the wizarding world. He had lived with the goblins the last 60 years, so he never had truly learned how the sorcerers were thinking and acting this century. One of the improvements the sorcerers had made were the wands they were carrying now, and with the newly invented wands, sorcerers could finally cast spells with them, not like Sal, who used his staff solely in rituals to draw runes, to chant and so on. There were also first spells that did not base on runes anymore, even if the major part in casting was still drawing runes in the air. When Godric caught Sal scrutinizing him while doing magic, he finally asked Sal, "What are you looking at?" "You're casting," Sal answered. "Why?" Sal shrugged. "It's interesting," he answered. "I have not seen someone using his wand like that." There he stopped before saying anything that would bust him, and the fact that he was a time traveler.
"What do you mean?"
"How do you cast, if not like that?" Godric said, a little bit stumped. Sal just shrugged again. "I normally use rituals or wandless magic to get what I want. Some things I might not be able to do at all," he answered, seemingly unconcerned. "I am a druid. I never learned how to be a sorcerer," Godric supplied, staring at him. One moment there was silence between them, then Godric started to speak again. "So," he finally said, "so that means you cannot cast spells like I do?" "Yes," Sal answered. "My staff would not let me do it." "Can I see your staff?" Sal hesitated, then he pulled it out of his wand holster and unshrunk it. When Godric took it, he hissed. "You all right?" Sal asked, concerned. He had never given his staff to anyone, so he did not know how it would feel to anyone but him. "Yeah," Godric answered, his eyes fixed on Sal's staff. "But it reached out for my magic as soon as I took it. It did do nothing, but it felt really, really strange. You know, as if your staff was sentient somehow." "It did?" Sal asked, astonished. He could feel the connection to his staff even now, but he never had thought that his staff would reach out to another one's magic. "Yes," Godric said. "For a moment it felt as if it wanted to harm me, but then the feeling just stopped." "Oh, maybe it would have harmed me if I had taken it without your consent." "That might be," Sal answered, shrugging. "Normally you do not give away your staff to anyone except maybe blood relatives you trust. A staff is attuned solely to your own magic. Another one cannot use it." "How so?" Godric asked, fascinated. "'Cause," Sal answered, shrugging, "it contains parts of creatures you are descendant from. The cores base on the major creatures your mother and your father are descendants of. Normally that combination is different enough to tune your staff solely to you, and of course your magic is embedded in it after you have used it for a while." "Cores? As in you have more than one or two?" "Yes," Sal smirked. "My staff contains 8. 8? Yes. But I am an old one and the son of a Firbolg-born, so my staff is an exception." "Firbolg-born? The son of 2 Firbolgs?" Sal tried to explain, but Godric just looked at him confused. "Firbolg, like phoenixes and dragons." This time understanding lit Godric's eyes. "No, you're talking about pure bloods." Sal nearly chocked on his own salvia. Pure bloods? The last time he had heard this word was over 1,000 years ago, when he still had been living in the future, and it definitely had meant something different at that time. Godric did not notice his reaction at all. Instead he looked again at the staff in his hands before handing it back to Sal. "And a descendant of Merlin Emrys," Godric said, continuing their conversation as if nothing happened. Well, for him nothing did happen. "Whatever magic you possess, I am sure it definitely is not normal." Sal just shrugged and shrunk his staff again to put it away. He had long ago given up on being just Sal or just Harry. After that incident, Godric tried to teach Sal to use a wand, but his teaching was mostly fruitless because of the lack of a wand on Sal's side. Finally, some weeks later, they reached the later British part of the island, and with it the home of Godric's sister and her husband, the brother of Godric's betrothed. "Here we are," Godric said, looking at the castle that indicated money. "Let's meet my relatives." "I don't think you need me anymore," Sal said, shrugging, "and I do not belong here. So why should I intrude? You rescued my life, and you are fun to be with, so why shouldn't you?" Godric countered and then nearly pushed Sal inside. When they reached the great hall of the castle, Godric just banged open the doors and cried, "Hello, I'm back." In the hall, Sal could see 3 persons sitting at a table eating. All 3 looked up when the doors met the walls. Their gaze first locked with Godric's, then turned to Sal. "And you have brought someone with you." A young man with raven black, unruly hair and warm brown eyes finally commended. "Did you pick him up, or did he pick you up?" Well, Peverell, it might have been me that needed picking up," Godric answered and shoved Sal forward. "But that doesn't matter. I can repay him for rescuing my life." "Rescuing your life? What have you been doing, Godric Medred, Harry James?" Sal nearly cringed himself when he heard the outraged voice of the tall female with long black hair and dark, nearly black eyes. She had a few striking parallel scars at her left hand, which looked like a bird of prey had hit her with its claws. Her voice was cool and somehow embedded a slightly frightening tone. That she used a part of Sal's own name did not help at all. "Well, at least I now know that my name was in my family long before I was born," he thought sarcastically, "and I even have the honor to be named after the founder of my house in Hogwarts." "Nothing, my dear, nothing." Godric tried to soothe the woman. "Nothing?" the other woman in the room asked. She had striking red hair and brilliant blue eyes. "That's a lame excuse, my dear brother, and definitely a lie." Sale snickered at the eyes that were scrutinizing Godric. The last weeks he had learned that the founder of Gryffindor House was stupidly brave and honorable, but also a fellow no one really could hate. He was a really sunny character, laughing and joking all the time. Normally his charm worked to help him out of situations like the one Godric was in now, but normally the others were not immune to his charm. "Well, it's long forgotten," Godric rumbled. "And it wasn't really grave, nothing life-threatening." "Really?" This time Sal snorted. "I had to practically bind you for a week to your bed, and you tell them it was nothing life-threatening?" he said while raising an eyebrow. "Really, Godric? Maybe I should tell you exactly to which length I had to go to help you survive. And don't forget, I am a healer. I am trained to rescue lives." The others now looked at Sal. "You're a healer?" Godric's sister asked, interested. Sal nodded. "I am? How long have you been a healer?" Sal blinked at that question and asked himself why she wanted to know, but then he shrugged and answered. "Several years," he answered. "And I know what I am talking about. I was a healer, working in the war with the goblins." "So you are experienced," the other woman, Godric's betrothed, said, now scrutinizing him. "I think I am," Sal answered, shrugging. "But I do not see why you need to know that." The women looked at each other. Then Godric's betrothed spoke up again. "Do you have to be somewhere, or do you have plans for the next years?" Sal stared at her, then he shrugged again mentally. Anastasius was still by the goblins, so he did not need Sal at the moment. Or at least not often. Sal did not delude himself thinking that his son would stay away from him for the next decades. It was more likely that Anastasius would turn up in at least 5 or 6 years, clingy like a small child and wishing to be fed again after all. Anastasius was still not all grown up yet, and because of that had still sometimes the urge to return to his parent to be fed again, and Anastasius would find him wherever he was. The bond between furball child and furball parent ensured that still Sal was free to do what he liked, even if Anastasius would decide to turn up again. "No," he finally answered the question. "I do not have any plans." The answer was a Cheshire grin, and a slightly worried feeling settled in Sal's stomach. "How about working for us?" Godric's sister asked. "We would need someone like you." "I doubt you will be hurt often enough that I would have to do much," Sal answered severely. "Well, maybe," the sister said, "but we need you anyway." Peverell snorted. "You are planning to add him to your imbecilic idea of taking on more than one apprentice at a time?" he asked his wife, Godric's sister, and his sister, Godric's betrothed. Both just shrugged. "I don't think it is an imbecilic idea," Peverell's wife said. "I am sure it will go well. And you know, my dear husband, we need to take on more than one apprentice. There are not enough masters who take on apprentices, and we cannot let someone be untrained. it would end in a disaster. Yes, I know, my dear. Still, why does it have to be you? Because we can. Except that we have no place shielded enough that the apprentices would stay. Save. This castle might be good for some apprentices, but it's not good for the extent you are planning. And think about the gathering of the lords. Do you really think that they would grant you the right to train their children? I am Lord Lefay, Godric answered shrugging, and you are Lord Grim. We should have enough influence to turn the tides to our liking. I should have known my sister Rena has recruited you for her plans, Peveril sighed. Of course I have, Peveril, Rena, Godric's betrothed, said. He will be my husband soon, so it is best if he is also helping us. Yes, Godric grinned. And I will be able to teach the apprentices fighting and dueling without having to teach them all the other stuff I do not like to teach. Figures that she would rope you in like that, Peveril said, sighing. May I ask what you are talking about? Sal cautiously asked. We plan to open a place where we can teach a lot of apprentices at the same time, Godric's sister answered, and by the way, I am Helga Grimm. Oh, excuse me. I should have done that before even trying to recruit you. I am Rowena Grimm, soon Lefay, and that's my brother Peveril Grimm, Rena said. Sal thought for a moment that his heart stopped. Rowena, Helga, and Godric Gryffindor. He did not stumble over the founders, did he? A pleasure to meet you, Sal said. I am Salazar Emrys. Salazar Emrys? Helga asked. Emrys as in Merlin Emrys? Sal just winced when the next of the founders tortured his name. Yes, Emrys as in Merlin Emrys, he answered. So the line of Emrys still exists? Peveril said, now scrutinizing Sal. Your lord should attend the gathering of the lords. He has a right to do so. Emrys is no line of lords. We are commoners, Sal answered, shrugging. The others stared at him as if he had lost it. You are descendants of Merlin Emrys, lad, and you think you are commoners? Even if you might one time have been, since the gathering of the lords gathered the first time we counted the house of Emrys as one of us. Merlin Emrys was the teacher of Camelot and its ward holder. There is no way to still count him as a commoner, Peveril said with wide eyes. Sal just shrugged. I never thought of claiming a lordship, he said, shrugging. And Father Medin taught a lot of people. I don't think that is so remarkable. You? Godric blinked at that. I thought you were just a descendant and never thought you were the head of house. Sal did not know what to tell him. Maybe it was best just to tell outright that he was the last of his house. That would explain the most. But before he could think of even answering, Rena spoke. I might be inclined to think that Salazar was away for a long time. I am sure if we ask him, he will tell us that he has not been in the British sorcering world for some decades. She said. Sal looked up, her knowing eyes met his and he cringed inwardly. She had heard when he nearly said father instead of Marden before. I wasn't, he answered. I did not even know about the existence of the gathering of the lords until some decades ago. Well, when you did not know, then you know now, Peveril said. You should come with us and claim your seat next time. Maybe, Sal answered. And you should maybe think about teaching with us, Rena said, smiling. We could need another hand. Sal raised an eyebrow at that. I believe I will not be of use teaching, he answered. I do not know myself how to use a wand as I never had one myself. I will be unable to teach that. But you know potions, Godric pointed out. I have seen you brewing often enough. And runes, or healing. Yes, but... And we need you as a healer anyway. Helga intercepted. When we really plan on teaching more than one apprentice at a time, we will need an experienced healer. And you do have your healer's oath, don't you? I do, Sal answered. But, well then it's settled, Helga said. You have time, you are a healer and you have experience in some fields of magic. That's enough, and do not worry about your lacking knowledge about wand magic. We will remedy that shortly. But, soon Sal discovered that protesting was no use with the founders. They stomped all his protests with the fact that he had nothing to do right now and could help because of this. At the end of the evening, Sal had surrendered to teach potions, runes and healing in their planned school. The next morning he was met with 2 enthusiastic witches and an enthusiastic sorcerer. Peverell had just grumbled about paperwork and left, who decided to bring him to Londinium and Diagon Alley for a wand. So they mounted some horses and rode 2 hours until they finally reached Diagon Alley. There they entered and brought Sal to Ollivander's. It was the first time for Sal to enter Ollivander's again since the founding of the business. He somehow smiled when he saw that the shop had not changed much. "Hey Theonel, Ollivander, we bring you a customer," Godric cried while entering. The man that answered Godric's cry was young and looked a lot like a younger Ollivander, Sal's godfather. It nearly hurt to see him because of the reminder of the dead. "Greetings, Lord Lefay and the ladies, Grim," the man replied. "What can I do for you today?" As an answer, Sal was shoved in front of the counter. "He needs a wand," Godric answered. Ollivander blinked. "He looks a bit old to not have one," he then said. Sal rolled his eyes and extracted his staff. "I just have this," he said, showing his staff in his full length. "I am a druid. I never bothered with getting a wand." With that he glared at Godric. "Well, until someone decided I need one." Ollivander blinked. Then he took Sal's staff. His eyes widened. "A true masterpiece," he said with gleaming eyes. "And old, very, very old." Sal just shrugged. "It is mine," he answered. When Ollivander looked up, Sal saw that the man had understood him. Sal had meant it was made for him, but hadn't said so because of his company. Of course, Godric knew it was made for Sal, as Sal had said something like that to him indirectly. But Sal definitely did not wish to remember Godric of it, especially after his staff had been declared as very, very old. "I am sure I am unable to make something like that," the old man said. "But I can surely find something that can accompany this masterpiece." Sal just raised an eyebrow. "I am not sure if I will be ever able to handle a wand right," he said to the wand maker. The man just smiled. "I am sure you will be able to. Using a wand is definitely easier than using a staff like that, with a little bit of practice." "I am sure you will do well," he answered. "And now I will need you to come with me. I will take you to my ingredients, and you will pick those that feel right to you. The same goes for the wood. I am sure we will find something that will fit you." Sal sighed, but then he followed Ollivander. In the back of Ollivander's shop was his workplace. There 1,000 of cores were stored on shelves around the room. On the earth there were boxes filled with woods. The last time Sal had been here, the cores had been at the same places. The woods instead had been standing in one of the corners. Staffs were simply much longer than wands. "Here we are. Feel with your magic what fits you," Ollivander said. "As a staff carrier you should be able to do so very easily." Sal sighed again, but did as he was told. He closed his eyes and tried to feel a pull from something. Soon he really did. At his right he nearly could feel a connection to him. What affinity would call him? Sal knew he had 8 affinities, but he also knew that this time not all 8 would end up in his wand. So what affinity was stronger than the others? And would it stay the same throughout the centuries, or would it change? Would it again be a phoenix feather for him? He followed the slight pull he was feeling and ended up with a glass in his hands. When he opened his eyes he recognized it instantly. "Dementor blood," he said. "So no phoenix feather." Ollivander just smiled. "A potion master, I see," he commented, and took the glass. "And now go on, please." Sal closed his eyes again and again he spread his magic through the room. This time he felt a pull from his left and followed it again. When he opened his eyes again he had in his hands a glass with feathers. "Thunderbird feather," he said, giving up the glass to the wand maker. "A curious combination." The wand maker commented, "Very deadly and very dark. Nothing a light sorcerer could use at all." Sal pressed his lips together. He knew he wasn't dark, but he also knew he definitely wasn't light. He had killed and maimed in battle to protect the innocent, and he had not regretted it at all. He had learned the dark arts, even if he was a healer. No, this wand was definitely nothing a light sorcerer would have. This wand wasn't something a healer would have. But Sal never had been a normal healer. "You seem to worry," the wand maker said in that moment. Sal just shrugged. I am a healer, he said as an explanation. The wand maker blinked and looked at the ingredients in his hands. You are? He asked, astonished. I would never have guessed that with these, a healer should not even be able to have those. I also am a protector, Sal answered, sighing. Ollivander stared at him. How? Your oath should prevent you from killing. My oath is worded differently, Sal answered. It is a variant of the healer's oath. I am able to kill, but I will carry the consequences if I kill the wrong one. A guardian healer, the wandmaker said, understanding. I heard about them, but I never thought that I would meet one of them, and then you are all so old. It would be better if you would not tell my company about my age or— I understand, Ollivander answered, smiling slightly. Just one question. Who are you? Sal hesitated for just a moment, contemplating on his course of action. How much truth should he give? How much trust to a man he didn't know? But then, the man in front of him was a wand maker. He would not tell, so Sal answered with a variation of the truth. I am Merlin Emrys's son, he said, and the wand maker blinked again, his mouth hanging slightly open. A few minutes' silence reigned the air, then the wand maker shook his head to clear it, closed his mouth, opened it again just to close it a second time. Well, we should continue, Ollivander finally managed to say, and then instructed. Put your hand in the box there. Wait, if a wood flies into your hand. If it doesn't, try it with the next box. Sal nodded and kneeled. He did as he was told, and finally, after the fifth box, a wood zoomed in his open hand. He pulled it out. Maple, he said. And there is the connection between the light arts of healing and the dark arts of the protector, Ollivander said. Your wand will be able to heal and to protect, even if its dark cause will make it better as a protector than as a healer. Maybe you have to protect more this time than to heal, Merlin's son. Maybe, Sal answered. Now go out to your friends. It will take a few days until I have crafted it. Sal nodded and left. How did it go? Godric asked. Sal rolled his eyes. I closed my eyes and let my magic guide me to the ingredients. How did you think it would go? Godric just huffed. You know I did not mean it like that, Salazar. But Sal just ignored him. Instead, he and the women left the shop. Godric followed them instantly. A few days later, Sal returned and paid for his wand. After that, his training began. Rowena, Helga, and even Godric seemed to think of him as a test subject in teaching. With Sal's memory and their guiding, it did not take long for him until he was able to use his wand like them. Just a few days later, Godric and Peveril left to Londinium, again for the next gathering of the Lords. Sal originally did not want to come along, but soon found out that he had no choice in that matter. Godric and even Peveril were insistent. When they reached Londinium, the other two lords took Sal to a cave that contained the hall for the gathering of the Lords. The day before in the morning, Sal had decided to brush up his etiquette lessons. Don't worry, Godric had told him at that time when Sal asked how he should behave in front of the other lords. No one will judge you for not knowing the etiquette, just behave as you usually would. Peveril and I will do the rest. Sal had not been happy with this answer, but stayed silent. He had guessed that Godric had wanted to soothe him, because the other thought Salazar never had any formal training, and Sal could not fault him for that. Still, he would have preferred a short overview over the common etiquette, just to see if his knowledge still matched with the current time. In the end, however, he decided not to ask again. If his knowledge didn't match anymore, there was no way he would be able to learn it all until he met the other lords, and if it still matched, then he did not need the help of the other two. So he stayed silent. The next morning, however, he searched his meagre possessions for the official court robes he normally had worn on Arthur's court. Then he combed his long black hair and started to braid it in the way he had been taught by Gawain. Simple green and silver ribbons, the same color his official robes had, now adorned the braided parts of his hair, and a simple hairpiece, which looked like a silver three-angled spider web, completed the headdress. Over his robes he simply wore his travel cloak with the hood concealing his hair. Godric and Peveril also wore more formal robes that day, but told Sal he should not worry about something like that. So Sal shrugged and decided not to mention that he indeed possessed and wore formal robes, even if their style was older than the robes Godric and Peveril were wearing. So he followed the two lords to the hall where the gathering would take place. The first thing Sal saw when he entered the cave was the obelisk. In the middle of the hall stood an obsidian obelisk which was high enough to lay your hand on it comfortably. "The Stone of Judgment," Godric whispered. "It was enhanced by Merlin himself." "It's the same stone Arthur drew Excalibur from." Sal said nothing. He knew that his father Arthur definitely did not draw Excalibur from anywhere. After all, the legendary sword originally belonged to Sal. But Sal also knew that Arthur indeed drew a sword from the stone. Caladrich, the first sword he had had, and it had been this stone, apparently. "The stone judges you. It will decide if your family truly is a part of this gathering or if it isn't," Peveril added. Sal just sighed and looked at the rest of the room. The most of the room was made of stone. The only exception were the wooden chairs for the lords, and even there was an exception. A throne-like stone chair was seated at the end of the hall, facing the chairs of the lords. "The throne," Peveril whispered when he saw Sal looking at it. Sal blinked and turned to look at Peveril. "You're joking, aren't you?" he said, shivering. He vividly remembered sitting on a throne for 3 agonizing weeks while Arthur recovered from his wounds. Sal had no intention doing so again. "I am not," Peveril answered. "We are still subjects to the Pendragon family, even if there is no one who can claim the title anymore." "Lord Grim?" a voice snarled in that moment and interrupted Peveril while speaking. "What a pleasure to meet you and Lord Luffey here in this humble halls." Immediately Peveril's back stiffed with distaste. One moment his features darkened, but then he schooled them to an unreadable mask and turned to the speaker. "Lord Gaunt," he greeted. "The pleasure is mine." The other lord just waved with his hand. "I am truly surprised that you even decided to come, Lord Grim," he said. "I thought a gathering from such lowly men like us is way beneath you, but then you also decided to bring a commoner to this holy halls. I am intrigued how Lord Selwyn will react." Sal raised an eyebrow when he heard the words. His eyes searched Godric's and asked a silent question to explain. "Lord Selwyn is the leader of the gathering," Godric whispered, but before he could add another thing, a second man entered the cave. "Lord Gaunt," he greeted. "Lord Grim, Lord Lefay." Then he looked at Sal and raised an eyebrow at Peveril and Godric. "I hope you have a good explanation for disrespecting our traditions and bringing a commoner to this place," he said. "There is a very good explanation, Lord Selwyn," Peveril said. "Just hear us out before. I told you that the Lords Lefay and Grim still think themselves superior to us." Lord Gaunt interrupted him. "They even think that they have the right to bring a commoner in the halls of the gathering. This behavior is outrageous, Lord Selwyn." Sal saw that other lords had entered the cave while they were speaking, the most of them nodding when Lord Gaunt spoke. "Throw him out and punish these 2 children. Even if it is the first time, we cannot let them do everything they want just because they are old ones." Gaunt finished, and Sal snapped. He had grown up again on Arthur's court, and had been taught how to behave as the son of Arthur. Throwing a person out of a lordly hall after this person was invited by other lords was one of the foulest things you could do. And not asking for a person's name before throwing them out was an even greater break in etiquette. After all, throwing someone out of a gathering was like declaring a blood feud. It was especially foolish to declare a blood feud with a family that could have more influence than your own. Of course, it could have changed over time, but the rules Arthur, Gawain and Lancelot had taught him were rooted deeply in his mind, and Sal could not stop himself from reacting like he would have reacted if he had been on Arthur's court. Salvezahar threw back his hood and stared at them with emotionless eyes and a face like a mask, in his green eyes hidden the blasting of the phoenix's eternal flames. "I thought this hall was built out of stone to last for eternity," he reprimanded the lord softly, still displaying no emotions at all. "Now I see I was mistaken. The stone seems to be here to shadow your eyes from the world around you, my dear lords, and truly, this chamber works wonders. There even is a shadow on your names as you have not named yourself, and also not asked for mine until now." Lord Gaunt blinked and stared at him. "What are you implying, boy?" Lord Selwyn asked in Lord Gaunt's stet. "I am merely inquiring why the Lord asks for strife between our families by looking down on his own breeding and everything his parents might have taught him since the day he was born." Sal said softly, "I am quite sure a lord of his caliber would not fall so low to forget his own education in our ways." Lord Selwyn simply gawked at him, and Sal started to ask himself if the etiquette he had been taught had changed so much since the last time he had to use it, that they did not recognize the faux pas they had committed. It was another, very old-looking man who broke the sudden silence with his laughter. Then he stepped up to them and bowed to Sal. "I am Alistair Connor Declan McGonagall, Lord of the Glen Gowlin Pixia," he said formally. "I am intrigued who you are, dear child. I have never seen someone chastising a lord with so much elegance like you did today." Sal raised an eyebrow when the old lord answered. "So I take it that the conduct in a formal gathering has changed since the days of my father?" he asked the old lord softly. The man, Lord McGonagall, simply shook his head. "It hasn't, young child," he answered. "They simply are not used to anyone who knows better how to behave than them themselves. It has been a long time since I last encountered someone who knew our ways as good as you seem to do." "I am honored by your words, Lord McGonagall, even if I am sure that you are exaggerating," Sal said, a little bit surprised that the other lords seemed not to have been as harshly reprimanded for behaving wrongly in their youth than he had been. "For my name I am Salvus Saha Serendu Harry James Emrys, Lord of Emrys and wardholder of my ancestral home in Picture. I am pleased to meet a neighbour of my realm." Sal also answered the bow of Lord McGonagall, but kept his bow not as deep as the lord had bowed before. He did it automatically and stiffened when he stood straight again and recognized his slip. A lord to another one bowed equally low. A prince or king instead, like Sal had been trained, bowed less than a lord, and the lord in front of him definitely had seen his slip and was calculating its meaning. Was he the only one? Sale glanced at the other lords, especially his slack-jawed friends, and relaxed, to his relief. No one, except of the old lord in front of him, that is, had seen his short slip up. The lord in front of him still stared at him with calculating eyes. The others instead roared at him. "Emrys?" Gaunt roared. "You should know that it will not become you well if you make a joke like that in this halls." "The Emrys line is extinct," Lord Selwyn hissed. "There is no way that a mere boy like you does belong to a line as powerful as Emrys." Others said the same and more, while Godric and Peverell still seemed to gawk at him for his ability to act like a lord should, until Lord McGonagall intervened. "Follow me, young lord," he addressed Sal, and winked him to the obelisk. "Just lay your hand on the stone and state your claim." Sal hesitated just a second, then he followed the instructions. The stone was warm to his hands when he touched it softly. Then he stated formally, "I am Salvus Ahar Emrys. I am lord to my line. I call forth the lordship I carry. I am Lord Emrys as I was born to my father, who was the last Lord Emrys. So be it, so mote it be." White light erupted from the stone and bathed him in a soft golden glow. At the same time, the throne, to Sal's dismay, started to shimmer in the same golden glow that enveloped Sal. The old lord raised an eyebrow and looked pointedly at the stone throne and then at Sal. Sal sighed and shook his head. "But you could," the lord whispered softly, so that the other lords who were staring at Sal could not hear him. Sal just raised an eyebrow, then the mischief took over and he answered. "Of course I could," he said. "I am his son after all. I just won't because I hated to be a prince, and I definitely will loathe it even more if I were a king. So don't tell anyone." And with that he chuckled and returned to Godric and Peverell, leaving behind a slack-jawed old man. "Well, that was Godric. Well, that should be enough to prove that we did not bring a commoner to our gathering." Lord Selwyn simply blinked at Godric, still absolutely flabbergasted after the display he had seen a minute before. "Ah, of course, Lord Lefay," he finally said. "And I apologize to Lord Emrys for doubting his claim." "You do not have to apologize for doubting my claim," Sal answered. Doubting the claim was nothing I would hold against you. Breaking the rules of a gathering and trying to throw me out without hearing me out at first, and even without asking for my name instead, that is something you should apologize for, Lord Selwyn. The Lord blinked again, then he inclined his head. You are right, Lord Emrys. I apologize for my behavior. I accept, Sal answered, also inclining his head. But do not forget, I will not accept another breach in etiquette against myself as easily as now next time it happens. You are a harsh lord, Lord Emrys. Lord Selwyn said softly. Sal just shrugged. If I would have followed my father's lead, you would be dead by my feet now. I do not see it as harsh when I think of the answer my father would have given you by now. Lord McGonagall nearly choked on his own saliva when hearing Sal's answer. Yes. Well, we should get started. Lord Selwyn finally said, and the other lords sat down in one of the chairs. Sal followed Godric and Peveril and sat down next to them. Lord McGonagall instead sat next to Sal. And while Lord Selwyn took one of the chairs and sat it down next to the obelisk so that he could see the whole gathering, Lord McGonagall whispered in Sal's ear, "Was what you told me earlier a joke? Or are you really somehow the son of King Arthur Pendragon? Or did I just understand it wrongly?" Sal smiled at the old lord. "My mother belonged to his line," Sal answered as softly as the lord. "I was adopted by him as his son and heir until he would have a child of his own. He never had a son he recognized except of me." The old lord shuddered. "So I am fine by being my blood father's heir. The title of Emrys is definitely enough to carry. I do not need this." He nodded to the throne. "Also on my plate." The lord opened his mouth again but was interrupted by Lord Selwyn, who started the gathering. "Today is the 70th gathering of the lords," he said. "Our people are flourishing, and the cooperation with the Mundines is getting along well. Is there something you want or need to discuss today?" "There is, my lord," a lord in the background said and stood up. "The gathering recognizes Lord Arthur Bones," Lord Selwyn said, and Lord Bones continued. "My clan is flourishing well, but there aren't enough teachers for our youth." Lord Bones said gravely, "We need some masters to teach our ways and our magic to them, but there is no one in my clan that hasn't an apprentice or that has the ability to teach an apprentice. I came today to ask for places to send our youths to so that they learn to control their magic." When he ended, 6 other lords also stood up. "I have come for the same," they chorused, and after that stared at each other, surprised that they were not the only ones. "I am looking for a place of our youths as well," Lord McGonagall said while standing up. "I do not need it this year, but I need it next. I simply have not enough masters anymore that can take on an apprentice." "I told you that the apprenticeship will be a problem in the near future, Peveril," Godric whispered softly. "Rena and Helga are right. Taking on more than one apprentice will be the only way to ensure the education of our youths." Peveril just inclined his head and stood up. "I came here with a declaration that could aid your needs," he said loudly to the gathering. Lord Selwyn nodded and said, "The gathering recognizes Lord Peveril Grimm," he said, and the eyes of the other lords fell on the Grim Lord. "My wife and my sister are planning a new concept of apprenticeship," he said. "The Lords Emrys and Lefay are also aiding in their task. My clan will have the same problems like yours in a few years' time. Because of that, my wife and sister want to open a place to teach our young in groups. It will not be an apprenticeship. Instead, it would introduce the children to magic and its ways. We plan on teaching them enough so that a real master will be able to take on more than one apprentice at the time they have finished their education with us. We are here to ask for your allowance to do so and to ask for your trust in our abilities so that you would send your children to us to be trained." "How do you plan to take on more than one apprentice?" Lord Selwyn asked, surprised. "We plan to teach them the basics for all apprenticeships," Peveril answered hesitatingly. "The easy things that could be taught to more than one child. Even now, it's simply the idea to take away the first 8 years of apprenticeship from the masters. After that, the children should know enough so that a master does not have to worry anymore. And when the children do not learn only the basics of one apprenticeship, but of more, there should also be less problems with their understanding of magic, which would aid the masters in their tasks. Then maybe the masters also can take on more than one apprentice at a time. It would aid all. An interesting concept you have, Lord McGonagall said, staring at them. I think I would like to send you some of my children to test it. If it really aids them and the masters, I would think about giving the rest of my children in your hands for the next 8 years. Another lord in the back nodded. I would do the same, he said. But there is the problem with harvest. A lot of the parents need the aid of their children at that time of the year. And if we would send them back for harvest every year? Sal asked and stood up. They could be taught by us for the most of the year. And they could be sent home for harvest. Like that you can test them and be sure that they know as much as they should know at that time in their apprenticeship. And if they do, you can send them and others that want to join back after harvest. If they don't, you can choose to search for another way. As long as they learn to control their magic and they still can help in harvest, I would not even be bothered if they would know a little bit less than they would if they were apprenticed. Another lord said, the children need to be taught and I would like to test your idea. If they learn less, I still would send them back until I have enough masters that could teach them better. There is just one question. When will you start with it? Lord McGonagall said. We plan to start in a year's time after harvest, Godric said. We still have to gather some ideas about what we need to teach the children. It will take some time to decide what we will teach and how we will teach it. We will send out letters when we are ready to take in the first apprentices. Then I will wait for your letter eagerly. Lord McGonagall said, and others also inclined their head to show their content. Well, your idea seems to have merit, Lord Selwyn said. The gathering recognizes the idea of the Lords Grim le Fay and Emrys. We will watch over it for the next years. If it really aids us, we will think about inducting laws that will establish this idea in our culture. Anyone against this decision? No one raised a hand. Anyone for this decision? Nearly everyone raised their hands this time. Well, so mote it be. Let us see the following years how this idea of yours will develop. And with that, the last word was spoken in the gathering about the idea of a school. Nearly 80 years later, the laws about Hogwarts would be added to the laws of the gathering. Until then, every year the leader of the gathering would ask about the school and how the lords felt about it. It never had a negative reply in all the years the leader asked. Back to original future timeline. Dear readers, I am proud to present you a new column in the Quibbler. Our new columnist, Oliver Twist, will present you with facts about the wizarding world you never knew and never thought about. Xenophilius Lovegood, Editor-in-Chief of the Quibbler. Founding Facts. It's the end of August and soon it will be time to return to Hogwarts again. I am sure you all remember the stone walls of Hogwarts, her homey feeling and the warmth that will fill you as soon as you set a foot on her grounds. And with the beginning of the new year also some new students arrive. They will enter the halls of Hogwarts with huge eyes, innocent of the trials of life. They will stare at this beautiful castle in wonder and will learn to love it like they love home. But there they will not just learn magic, they will also learn house rivalry. House rivalry and prejudice. Why, staying friends with your best friend since you were children after he or she was sorted in Slytherin and you yourself in Gryffindor. The founders of Gryffindor and Slytherin hated each other. The blood feud cannot be mended even in another 1,000 years. Let the Sorting Hat talk about school unity. Let him sing. There is no mending of the feud between Gryffindor and Slytherin. There are no friendships between the houses, and no teachers who even try to be fair to every house. You think that? Really? Then let me tell you a story. There is an old book in the library of Hogwarts. It's hidden in a little room, and its name is The Teachers of Hogwarts. Last year I found it just by accident. So, whoever you are, when you still go to Hogwarts, go looking for it. There are some interesting things provided in it. Some of these things are some important facts about the teachers who teach or taught at Hogwarts. Just ask the book for the founder of your house, or maybe another founder, and read yourself. I did it, and I found things you would never have guessed. Did you know that Slytherin argued about the safety of Hogwarts and that he did not want Muggle parents come to Hogwarts? Did you know that even if he and Gryffindor had a falling out in the middle of the Great Hall, that 3 days later the other founders gave in to his wishes? When I read that, I searched the library about the historical events at that time. Did you know that at that time, Britain was attacked often by Viking ships? They murdered, they maimed, and they made slaves to bring them back home. Did you know that the Muggles at that time blamed sometimes wizards for the Vikings simply because wizards could hide but did not even think about hiding their neighborhood? Not everyone was so brave and foolish like Gryffindor, who nearly lost his life protecting a Muggle village in his neighborhood. Well, maybe he would have lost his life if Slytherin would not have aided him. So Slytherin was trying to protect his students from the wrath of Muggles who were not protected by his students' parents. And don't forget, at that time Muggles knew about us. We were living with them, even marrying them. When they would have known about the school, they would have been able to enter it without wards against them. And the founders even tried to be fair. They did not only exclude the Muggle but also the magical parents. Or why do you think no parent ever entered Hogwarts, except if their child was mortally wounded? And even then they had to be brought in and could not come by themselves. But back to history. We know Slytherin left. Well, I cannot argue that statement. Slytherin left. Rowena died, then Helga, then Godric, and finally Slytherin left. Hugh, you might think. Isn't that the wrong order? Just check the dates. Even if Slytherin has no date of death, he has a date when he finally left Hogwarts, and that's more than 20 years after Godric Gryffindor's death. So when the Sorting Hat tells you that the unity shattered after Slytherin left, it simply tells you that the founders were a unity until the most of them had died. So back to our first years, back to Hogwarts. Think about it this way. When the founders could be united until they died, don't you think you can do it too? Forget house rivalry, forget biased teachers, and self-named heirs of Slytherin. Look at your classmates. They are not different than you. They are nervous. They are able to love, to hate, to be sad, to be happy. Even if they love to learn, even if they are living in the dungeons, they are still humans like you. You can still be friends. Just forget the red, the blue, the yellow, and the green on their uniforms. Their uniforms are all black. They all have classes. They all eat in the Great Hall. So, how about trying a little green for today or a little red? And when you want to protest, think about this. The Sorting Hat gives you a choice. So how can you really be sure that the red, blue, yellow, or green on your opponent's black uniform is earned? Maybe you are a Gryffindor and have shared a dorm with a Slytherin all along. Oliver Twist. Thanks, Harry said, handing back the quibbler to the blonde girl in front of him. She had lent him her newspaper after he had asked her. After all, he could hardly take out his own copy and read that one when he officially not even knew about the development with Oliver Twist. I don't mind the girl. Luna Lovegood, Ginny had called her, said, and took the newspaper. It's always good to know the more important things in the wizarding world. Ginny snorted while Neville nearly choked on his own saliva. Oh, sure, Harry said. Ginny just rolled her eyes at his reply, and Neville whispered in his ear. The Quibbler is known for its more eccentric view on the world. Ah, all right, Harry replied. Then he contemplated a bit before he added, well, the article about Hogwarts didn't seem too eccentric in my opinion. There were some details I never knew in it, but all in all it seemed to be the truth. And that's more than the Prophet is writing at the moment. Neville stared at him, then he turned and asked Luna if he could borrow her newspaper for a bit. He opened the Quibbler and began to read while Ginny was looking over his shoulder, also reading. Well? Harry asked when they finished. Do you think it's telling the truth? Neville asked, wide-eyed. Of course it is, Luna said. Daddy is always printing the truth. And since Oliver Twist is writing for him, there are finally a lot more people interested in it. He's now thinking about hiring a few people because he has started to have trouble printing all the subscriptions he has. Ah, all right, Neville said, clearly unsure what to think about that. Before he could add something else, the compartment door opened and Ron and Hermione entered. And while Ron instantly hunted down the food they had, Hermione plucked the Quibbler out of Neville's hands. You're reading Twist's article, aren't you? She asked. How do you? I heard the adults talking about the boy who is writing letters to the Quibbler, Hermione answered. Mrs. Weasley thinks that a young boy like him should think about school and not about listening to rumors, but see, Snuffles thinks it's brilliant. Until now I had no time to look at one of the articles myself, may I? I think you already have, Neville pointed out, but sure, I guess, not that it's my newspaper, it belongs to Luna over there. Hermione did not even listen. Instead, she started to read out loud. Harry just rolled his eyes at his best friend, as if he couldn't read the article himself. Slytherins in Gryffindor, Ron blurted out when Hermione ended. That's a joke, isn't it? What are you talking about, Weasley? Another voice said, this time coming from the compartment door. Malfoy was standing in the door, sneering at Ron. This article from Oliver Twist Malfoy, Harry answered, plucking the newspaper out of Hermione's hands and handing it to Malfoy. It talks about choices and about Slytherins in Gryffindor. Malfoy looked at Harry oddly before he snorted, hesitated, but finally he took the article nevertheless and looked it over. Rubbish, he finally said. The same rubbish as always. You shouldn't believe the newspaper of an insane editor, Potter. Harry just inclined his head. But you also shouldn't disregard an article like that, Malfoy, Harry said softly. After all, there is always the possibility that the article might be genetic, or that the article, even if it is wrong, might influence people who don't know better. You might be at a disadvantage if you don't know about something like that, Malfoy. Ron stared at Harry with an open mouth. Hermione frowned and Neville looked back and forth between Harry and Malfoy as if he was following a duel. Malfoy just sneered. Why so formal, Potter? Forgotten how to insult over the holidays? Harry just smiled. Of course not, Herr Malfoy. But after the faux pas I committed in first year, I cannot ask for your forgiveness without being formal. The apartment was silent enough to hear a pin drop. Harry's friends were staring at him as if he had gone insane, and Malfoy suddenly seemed unsure what to do with him. Of course, before the summer the original Harry would have never been civil with the heir Malfoy. The new Harry instead had been raised the pure-blood way of life and had decided to act on it. It was after all better to minimize his opponents instead of trying to fight the whole world all alone. And Malfoy could be useful at some occasion. Potter, what are you up to? Malfoy sneered, but Harry did not falter. He knew the original Harry had offended the Malfoy heir. Harry had decided to mend the relationship to the Malfoy family. He needed to mend the faux pas from first year before continuing with his plans. So he ignored the tone of Draco Malfoy and bowed low to the heir. I wish to apologize for my attitude the last years, he answered. I did not wish to offend you in first year. I was merely a child without guidance about the rights and wrongs in the world. As the Lord of the Grimm family and your cousin by blood, I beg you for your forgiveness, heir Malfoy. Cousin? Malfoy asked, astonished. Harry did not look up while answering. My grandmother was Doria Black. He knew that being family was important in a plea for forgiveness. Malfoy would not be able to forgive Harry easily if they weren't blood. As blood relatives, instead Harry was able to get forgiveness more easily without the heir Malfoy losing his face. Family should work together after all. Of course, Harry had other means to ensure that Malfoy would not stand in his way, but why forcing something that maybe could be mended through other means? After all, the young heir Malfoy would lose his face if he swatted away the formal apology of a family member. If Harry had murdered someone of Malfoy's family, then Malfoy would have been able to say no. But the faux pas Harry had committed was not even enough for a blood feud among their families. Well, at least until Harry entered the Wizengamot as a member. Malfoy hesitated just a moment. I will forgive you, Lord Grimm, he finally answered, stocking by the title. But you still owe me your allegiance. Aid. Heir Malfoy, Harry corrected. I am a lord. I cannot follow you. Again Malfoy stayed silent for a minute. Then he nodded. Aid it is, he said. You will not go against me or my house, even if we end up on different sides. So mote it be, Harry answered and stood straight again. Malfoy stared at him. I still don't like you, Lord Grimm, he said, and then he turned and shut the door behind him. Harry instead grinned. You don't have to, he answered. The closed door. Harry, what? Why? Ginny asked, with huge eyes. Because I had to, Harry answered simply. Albus Dumbledore might think nothing wrong with grudges, but I will not let a mere child grudge become a blood feud between our families. As I am still not a member of the Wizengamot, I still could mend it. I wouldn't have been able to if I would have been a member. Neville nodded. I understand. Grams told me often enough not to offend someone because it would do me no good if I had an enemy in the Wizengamot. And it definitely wouldn't be good if that enemy would be family, Harry confirmed. Definitely, Neville answered. The others just gawked at him. But that was Malfoy. Ron finally stuttered. Malfoy, Harry, Harry snorted. I know, Ron, he answered, but I cannot go around and insult him just because I do not like him. I am a lord, Ron. A lord, do you understand what that means? Ron just gawked. Harry, that was Hermione. I don't understand. What do you mean with, I am a lord? You cannot be a lord. I mean, how? This time Harry sighed and then frowned. It's simple, Hermione. My father was a lord, and because he is dead and I am 15, I am the lord now. Your father? But how do you know that? I mean, I thought you didn't know anything about your family. I didn't, Harry answered sincerely. But I found out this summer, and I definitely won't act like a disgrace to my family name anymore. But how did you find out? I mean, you weren't allowed to leave. We should change our clothes, Harry said, stopping her mid-sentence. We will be at Hogwarts in 10 minutes. You cannot just end. Hermione started, this time looking determined. Harry sighed. I know, Hermione. It's just something I cannot. He stopped. Then he shook his head. Snuffles told me. He finally said. Oh, Hermione blushed. I should have guessed it myself. Harry just left the compartment so that the girls could change. He felt a little bit guilty for lying, but then it wasn't the first time he had lied to someone, and it definitely wouldn't be the last. He just hoped that Hermione would not ask Sirius why he hadn't told Harry about his place in the world before this summer. When they finally reached Hogsmeade, Harry had gone silent. His friends were talking about the holidays, the new school year, and guessed what kind of defense professor they would have this year. Harry instead had taken to looking out in the dark. In his mind he could feel the heavy feeling of magic humming at him. He closed his eyes, listening to the humming of the magic that was filling the air. He felt sick by just listening. The more he listened, the more nauseated he felt by what he heard. Harry, are you all right? Harry startled and looked at Hermione, who watched him with a worried expression on her face. Yes? I am fine, Hermione, he answered. You sure? Ron asked. You look a little bit queasy. Just nervous, Harry answered. You know, I'm not sure if I should look forward to this year. Why? Hermione asked, surprised. Harry just snorted. 4 words, Hermione: Quirrell, Basilisk, Dementors, and tournament. Oh, yeah. Well, maybe this year will be nothing, Ron said, now with understanding in his voice. In that moment they hit the wards of Hogwarts, and Harry had to bite his cheek so that he would not cry out because of the pain he felt as soon as the wards settled on his shoulders. Like a rock, the wards fell on his shoulders, nearly breaking him with their weight. The nausea sparked and his head started to ache as if someone had hit it with a war hammer. Blood filled Harry's mouth when he refused to cry for pain. He turned his head and looked outside so that no one in the carriage could see the agony that was displayed on his face and the tears that threatened to fall. I don't think that this year will be a quiet year, Ron, Harry replied, proud of himself that his voice was nearly tremor-free while he still felt as if his head had exploded with pain. I definitely know now what I have to do first, he thought to himself. I will go mad if I have to feel this strain for the whole year I am here. In that moment a soothing sensation softly caressed his mind and the strain eased. Again tears threatened to fall, but he held them back. He could not cry, the others mustn't know. Well, you can at least hope for a quiet year, Ron said in that moment. Harry shrugged, still refusing to look at the others. I will think about it as soon as I know that the defense professor is no one who wants me dead, he answered. Touché, Ron snorted. Well then, let's stop hoping until after the feast. Exactly. With that, Harry turned and closed his eyes. The soothing sensation still caressed his mind and eased his unease. It was this warm feeling that finally reminded Harry why he loved Hogwarts so much, why he considered Hogwarts his home, and why he had decided to come here in the middle of the lion's den to kill of the pride that was hunting him. A maybe foolish step to do, but a step he would not change even if he would think about it again. Even if he had to destroy the school and everything it stood for, he would have come here for his revenge and he never would regret it. And then a familiar whisper filled his head, its origin in the soothing feeling that caressed his mind. "Welcome home," it said. "Welcome home, child. Welcome home, child. Of my child." "Harry, are you truly all right?" Hermione asked him in that moment again. Ron was also looking at him with a funny expression on his face. "Oh, I am, Hermione. I am," he answered, bathing in the warm embrace that aided him with swatting away the pain he felt. "Why shouldn't I be all right?" "I'm not sure, you just suddenly looked as if you were far away, you know," Hermione answered. Harry just smiled. "Don't worry, Hermione," he said. "I am really fine. I am just happy to be back, you know." "And I thought you worried," Ron said. Harry shrugged. "I still do, but I am back at Hogwarts, and whatever comes, comes, even with Voldemort. I cannot change it, even if I wanted to." Ron snorted. "And a minute before you looked as if you wanted to balk." Harry shrugged. "No," Harry answered sincerely. "I might worry about what will happen this year, but Hogwarts is home, you know, mate." Ron blinked, then he shrugged. "If you think so, mate," he answered, and Harry let it go. He knew Ron would never understand his feelings. Harry was not even sure if anyone else would. Hogwarts was home, but not like it had been home for thousands of orphans and unlucky ones. No, for Harry, Hogwarts meant more, even more than it had meant for the previous Harry, who had been an unlucky orphan. But that was something Harry Surly would not discuss with any of his friends. When the Sorting Hat started to sing, Harry was startled. He knew that the latest Oliver Twist text in the Quibbler was about the founders, but he was still surprised that the Sorting Hat had decided to sing about their history this year. Even if the history the Hat was singing about was slightly wrong, Harry cited when the Hat exclaimed that Slytherin had said, "We'll teach just those whose ancestry is purest." He knew that history got that one wrong. There had never been any talk about purity like they knew today from the proud man that had been Slytherin. But that was something long lost in time. So Harry bit his lip and kept quiet. Instead, he took the time to scrutinize the woman who would be his new defense against the dark arts teacher. He was sure that they would learn nothing in her classes, and after she started talking, he just got more convinced that his prediction would hold true. He sighed inwardly. "I will check the wards," he thought to himself. "Not only do they feel as if they want to kill me by just being there, but the choice of defense professors is also unbelievable. There must be a curse on the defense position. No one can have this much bad luck in choosing their teachers." Well, except it was a part of the plan, Harry wouldn't put it past the headmaster to explicitly hire bad professors when it somehow would fit in his plans. Still, it was better to check the castle woods now before having another defense teacher who couldn't teach next year. I should have checked them last year, Harry thought, but there was nothing he could do now. And last year he had been busy with his preparations for this year, and these preparations had been more important than a curse on the defense position. "Oh, how I hate to be me," Harry thought wryly. "Sometimes I truly wish I would have never started my plan to get revenge. There is simply so much to do and too less time to do it." And it was in this moment that he wished he had recruited someone else to aid him with his plans. But there was no one, well, except Regulus and Augusta, who did not know what he was up to. Not that he did not trust her, but he had not decided what he should tell her and what he shouldn't tell. And until then, he had no one but Regulus, the house elves, and his own insane mind to aid himself. But having the help of just one person and 2 house elves was nothing when you compared his forces with those of Albus Dumbledore or Tom Riddle, better known as Voldemort. "Well, I never planned to go against them one-on-one," Harry thought wryly. "We would be dead before even one curse was hurled at us. Riddle and Dumbledore would strangle them with their bare hands for daring to interfere with their plans." Harry smiled when this thought entered his mind, then he buried it beneath his occlumency shields and turned to his friends and entered their conversation as if nothing had happened at all. This year would be the turning point. This year he planned to drive them all insane, and he would start with a man who saw it coming for more than 14 years. Harry suppressed an insane grin when his eyes met those of his first target this year. For a moment Severus Snape felt a cold shiver running down his back. It would take a long time until he would understand what he felt at that time of the year. And while the students returned to the dorms, an enthusiastic little teacher hurried for the library to search it wholly. It took him the better part of the next hour to finally find what he was looking for, but in the end he found it. In a little room, hidden in the farthest corner of the library, the book he was looking for was situated on a pedestal. The Teachers of Hogwarts, it read. The tiny professor smiled, then he placed a hand on the book and whispered, Salazar Slytherin. The book glowed and then it opened somewhere in the front. The first thing the tiny professor saw was the picture of a regal-looking man in plain black clothes. The man had startling green eyes and he looked coolly at those that opened the book on his page. He was quite handsome, but the tiny professor could tell that the man was no one that should be crossed. On the other page were listed the things Salazar Slytherin had done and taught. The tiny professor also found a date that showed when Salazar Slytherin had left Hogwarts. There was no date of death and neither a date of birth, but there were a lot of other interesting information. The tiny professor absorbed himself in the book, first reading Slytherin's entry, then those of the other founders. Finally, he started to check the book itself. Another hour later, the tiny professor looked at his watch and cursed. He put the book away and hurried out of the library. Maybe he still would make it in time for the first teachers' conference in this year. Welcome to the first teachers' conference in the new year, Albus Dumbledore said, looking at the teachers' faces around him. There are some points I have to discuss with everyone. Like the story the Quibbler has been printing, Minerva McGonagall asked sharply. I cannot understand how Xenophilius could print such rubbish. I know he is a little bit odd, but he has never ever printed something utterly false before. He was a Ravenclaw for Merlin's sake. But the story he has printed wasn't rubbish at all, my dear Minerva. Phileas Flitwick squeaked. I checked the facts behind the story, and it was true. There really is a book about the Teachers of Hogwarts in the library, and it really contains the story like this. Oliver Twist has written it down. So he didn't make that up? Pomona Sprout asked, surprised. Flitwick just shook his head. I looked up everything, he said. I also proved the date the Teachers of Hogwarts book was connected with Hogwarts. Very impressive charms work. I would be unable to do something similar, even if I would know all the charms used. But you were able to confirm some facts? Snape asked with a raised eyebrow. Flitwick nodded enthusiastically. Yes, oh yes, he said with bright eyes, and what I found out is unbelievable. The book is about 1,000 years old. I would guess that Rowena Ravenclaw herself cast the spell to connect the book with the castle. So the facts of the article, true. It has to be, except Slytherin did something to confuse the book, and I doubt that even he was able to do something like that. Interesting, Albus said. I never thought that Hogwarts would contain secrets like that, Phileas Flitwick said enthusiastically. And these are not the only facts that have been twisted in time. Did you know that the names of the houses were not based to the last names of the founders? The founders would have had some problems if they really had decided to name the houses after their last names, as Helga Hufflepuff was in fact the sister of Godric Gryffindor, and Rowena Ravenclaw was his wife. And then there is the fact that Slytherin was a heel. Phileas, please, Albus interrupted. I am sure we can discuss this another time. Now we should turn our awareness to the recent problems. Oliver Twist McGonagall guessed. Yes, Albus answered, sighing. Him also. What else? Harry, Albus answered. I fear he might be slowly influenced by Voldemort. He should not have known what he knew at the trial. I need you to look out for him. If he really is starting to be influenced, we must know it as fast as possible to stop the influence. Influenced how? I am sorry, Minerva, Albus said, sighing. I am not sure. What I know is that Harry has a connection to Voldemort. And I guess that now that Voldemort has his body back, he might somehow have found a way to influence young Harry. Minerva McGonagall looked at him in dismay.
What should we do?
Watch him. If he displays an atypical behavior, come to me instantly. It might save Harry's life if you do. We understand, Minerva said, nodding. The other teachers also nodded their content. Thank you. Now, and what will we do about this twist fellow? Minerva McGonagall interrupted Albus. Albus just shrugged. Until now he did nothing that is worrisome. We should read his articles and act when it changes, but I would let him be until he does something more than questioning the Ministry and the Daily Prophet. But his last article was about Hogwarts. Minerva McGonagall said worriedly, what if he starts to criticize us? He is after all a student at Hogwarts, and Xenophilius Lovegood has shown him that he can write what he wants, and that no one will reprimand him for it. I do not believe he will start to criticize us badly. Albus answered confidentially. He might have written an article about Hogwarts, but there was nothing bad in it. And it was definitely based on the truth. Phileas Flitwick added, I am quite sure that the young man will soon stop writing again. After all, he will have classes to attend, and then there are his homework and his friends. I am sure whoever it is will soon have no time anymore to write. Minerva McGonagall just pressed her lips together but said nothing anymore. There was no arguing with Albus. If he wanted to be blind, he was, until it was too late. That twist had already started his doings at Hogwarts with his last article. Albus would not see until it was shoved into his face. So they turned to the more important tasks for the next school year. Albus had forgotten all about the article Oliver Twist had written when the meeting finally ended. He had other things in his mind, like the weapon that might be turning into a weapon for Voldemort. Albus would have to look closely at the boy, and he would have to decide on the next step he had to take. Maybe it is time to teach Harry some things he might need against Voldemort, and maybe I should ask Severus to teach him occlumency. Albus thought and returned to his study, not seeing the little shadow of a house elf popping out of existence after hearing everything they had discussed in the meeting today. Not knowing that somewhere in the castle the boy he was thinking about was briefed on everything that had been discussed in the meeting today. I see, the boy said after hearing everything. Well, let's show the almighty Albus Dumbledore that Twist is not taken lightly. Let the war begin. The boy knew that whoever would have the longer breath would finally win. But it did not matter at all. The boy had strings he could pull the old man wasn't even aware of. Harry was sure that in the end he would win this little war he had started against the headmaster of the renowned school of magic, even if it might cost Harry everything he had to bring the old man down to his feet. Severus Snape was sure that something was wrong today. It was his first lesson of the year with the fifth-year Gryffindors and Slytherins this year. But something was somehow different, wrong, maybe, and Severus could not figure out what had changed so suddenly that he felt disturbed. So he stood in front of his classroom and looked at the class, trying to place his feeling of wrongness. What in Merlin's name was wrong with this silent brewing class? Harry was standing in the classroom. In front of him was his bubbling cauldron. Next to him were Hermione at his left and Neville at his right. Ron was situated next to Hermione. Harry had been the one to arrange his place, simply because he remembered all too well Hermione's kind help to Neville, a help that in all these years unfortunately had not helped Neville at all. "No, Ron," Hermione hissed at that moment. "Don't do it like that. It says crushing. Can't you read?" Like Harry had thought, no help at all. But on the other hand, it was Ron. Harry ignored them both. He knew that Hermione tried to channel a genius in every class she was taking, but he also knew that her potion was slightly off. Of course, for a beginner it was definitely good enough, but every potion master in the world would feel ashamed if he had produced something like that. Still, Hermione acted as if every brewer should be proud of her result. Harry squeezed the next ingredient to get the juice. He did not even look at the instructions on the board. "Harry, you have to slice it. Can't you read?" Hermione hissed. "I can," Harry answered, "but I do not need to read wrong instructions." And with that he entered the juice of his ingredient in his potion. It turned a lovely sky blue color. Then he stirred and golden stripes started to mar the blue. Without looking up and also without stopping stirring, Harry reached with his left hand to Neville and stopped him from adding an ingredient. "The nettles first, Neville," he said without looking up. "And wait another 2 minutes. Your potion does not smell as if it has simmered enough." Neville next to him blinked. But the instruction says," he stuttered. "You forgot the frog blood earlier," Harry answered absent-mindedly. "When you add the nettles first and then add the frog blood, you can remedy your mistake. Just don't add the asphodel until you have added the frog blood or your cauldron will blow up. Your potion is simply not stable enough without it." "Harry," Hermione said in that moment, "you forgot to add the flour." "It's used as a stabilizer, Hermione," Harry answered, shrugging. "I don't need it. My potion is stable." But Harry just added the next ingredient to his cauldron. The healing balsam they were brewing turned silver with green streaks. Harry looked at it critically and then smelled in the air. "All right," he murmured, reaching out again, this time to Ron to stop him from cutting his ingredient. "No force, Ron," he told his friend while he was still concentrated on his own potion. "Think simply of it as butter in the sun. You don't need strength to cut nearly molten butter." Okay, Harry," Ron said, changing his way he held his knife. Then he scrutinized his ingredient critically before he started to softly cut it. Harry instead reached in his robe and extracted a little bag. He opened it and threw some herbs in his potion. "Harry," Hermione hissed, horrified. "Peppermint? Are you crazy?" The class was silent. Suddenly, Severus Snape knew exactly what was wrong with this class. Normally, Draco Malfoy would have tried to taunt Harry Potter at this point of time, and normally the imbecilic Neville Longbottom would have nearly blown up his cauldron at least 3 times by now. That was wrong with this class. Severus Snape searched for Longbottom between the other students and found him next to Potter, a Potter who did not read the instructions at the board. "Imbecilic, arrogant boy," Severus Snape muttered to himself and strode over to Potter just to see the boy taking out something out of his robe and throwing it in the potion in front of him. "Dunderhead, are you crazy?" he heard Granger hiss, horrified, and he hurried over to stop the Dunderhead Gryffindor from blowing them all up. "Are you crazy?" Hermione hissed. In that moment Snape entered the hearing range of the table. "Potter," he growled, "what do you do?" Harry stopped Neville from stirring. "The asphodel first, Neville," he said, stirring his own potion. Snape instead stood in front of his cauldron, gawking. "What have you done, Potter?" the potion master finally hissed. Harry looked up from his cauldron, extinguishing the flame beneath it with a wave of his hand. "I brewed, sir," he answered respectfully. "I did as I was told, Professor." The professor just stared at the potion in Harry's cauldron. Severus Snape was not sure what to think. The potion was perfect. How by Merlin's soggy underpants could this arrogant Gryffindor, this dunderhead Potter, create a perfect potion? Severus Snape would have been able to understand if the potion had been brewed better than normal. He even could have accepted it if Potter had created the best potion in class today. Wonders happened after all. But a potion master standard perfect potion. No way by Merlin and Morgana could Potter produce something like that. His eyes met the eyes of the boy and he struck. "Did I do something wrong, Professor?" Harry asked innocently. The answer was a legilimency attack by Snape. Harry just met Snape's eyes and let his professor's assault splatter against his shields. Not that his professor knew that his attack failed. For his professor, it looked like Harry had no shields. Innocent childhood memories were flying openly for the professor to see through Harry's mind. But these memories were nothing that someone could use against Harry. They were innocent. The real troublesome ones were buried behind Harry's invisible shields. His professor searched Harry's mind for deception, but he did not find any of that. "Did I make a mistake, Professor?" Harry asked softly and respectfully. The man stared at him and withdrew from Harry's mind. "No," he answered, while sounding as if he was tortured to death. "Your potion is decent," and with that he turned and stalked back in front of the class. Harry grinned and stopped Ron absent-mindedly from stirring in the wrong direction. "Lower the heat, Neville," he told his other companion. Ron, wrong direction. The other way round, and just 3 times, not more. Both boys blinked and corrected their tasks. Harry, Hermione said, did he just call your potion decent? Harry knew that this was a first. Not even the Slytherins received a decent from the potion master. But Harry also knew that boasting was the wrong thing to do now, so he just shrugged and extracted some shrunken vials from his robes. He unshrunk them and started to fill the vials with his potion. One of the vials he charmed unbreakable and brought it the potion master. The others he stowed away in the many pockets of his robe. When he gathered his things to wash up, he heard a vial falling on the floor. Don't worry, sir, he told the professor when he turned and found the potion vial he had given the sour man on the floor. I know that mistakes like that happen to the best of us. Luckily, there is a charm to prevent the breaking of the vials. Potter, Snape hissed, grinding his teeth. Yes, Professor? But the sour man said nothing else, and Harry simply turned around to gather the rest of his things. He brought them to the sink and let them soak in water. Severus Snape was watching him the whole time with grinded teeth. He wanted the child to squirm under his gaze, but the arrogant Gryffindor just started to wash up, absolutely unaffected by Severus Snape's stare. Potter, Severus Snape finally growled, detention, tonight after dinner. Not that he had a reason to give a detention, except that there had to be something wrong with the way the boy had produced his potion. The boy was absolutely horrible at potions. And even if the headmaster claimed that the Dark Lord was starting to possess the boy, there was no explanation. The Dark Lord might be a lot, but he definitely was no potion master. Decent in potions, definitely. But a master, never. And the potion in Severus Snape's hands was nothing less but master standard. So the only thing Severus Snape could do was to give the boy detention and rile him up. To his utter surprise, the reaction to his unjust detention was anything but what he thought it would be. Harry knew he had done nothing to get the detention, and even Snape seemed lost to find a reason for the detention. Still, Harry just inclined his head. Yes, sir, he answered, still respectfully. For a moment his teacher looked at him utterly flabbergasted. Harry knew why. Snape had hoped to rile Harry up. Instead, Harry had not reacted as he had hoped. And 20 points from Gryffindor, Snape added nastily. Yes, sir, Harry said, and returned to his seat. He was just in time to stop Hermione from letting her next ingredient fall in her cauldron. Caution, Hermione, it would do no good if you would let it fall in the potion. This one has to be stirred in, he told her while thinking about something totally different, namely the reasons of a sour potion master and his hatred for Harry. Hermione blinked. Harry, how do you suddenly know? She stopped, when Harry suddenly threw his hand out. 2 gold glittering runes shot through the classroom, and a shield sprang up around the potion of Theodore Nott from Slytherin. Not a second too late, the next second an explosion sounded through the dungeons, and one moment no one could see anything but smoke. Then Snape waved his wand and the air cleared again. He stared at his Slytherin with absolute loathing in his eyes. The cauldron was ash, but Theodore Nott wasn't injured. A golden shimmering shield shielded him and the rest of the class from the potion and the rest of the cauldron. Nutter, Snape hissed. Detention, tonight. The Slytherin shook under the gaze his head of house sent him. Harry growled but stayed silent. Your potion is ready, Neville, he finally said, his voice still slightly shaking with rage. Bottle it up. It's not perfect, but it's usable. Ron, stir again, counterclockwise, and then also bottle up. And Seamus, when you do that your potion will end up the same way Knott's did. The aforementioned Gryffindor's stirring spoon clattered when he let it drop in surprise. Then he blinked and looked at the instructions again. He blushed, added flour, and then took the stirring spoon again. With a careful glance at the not protesting Harry, he started to stir. Harry just let his gaze sweep through the class, looking for mistakes. He was angry with himself. He should have seen that Nott was doing something wrong. Instead, he had just seen it in time to prevent the boy from getting injured. It took him until he left the classroom to realize that he was a student and not a teacher. It had never been his mistake to begin with, but the potion masters who had more enjoyed to taunt Gryffindors than looking after the potions of his wards. And still Harry blamed himself. He should have seen it, he had been a teacher for many years. Hermione and Ron were looking at him strangely for the rest of the day, but when Hermione finally asked how he was able to know all that today in potions, Harry simply said that he had memorized his potion books. And somehow he really had. He knew them all by heart, even if he never actually had tried to memorize them. The next class was divination. They duty dream oracle. Harry nearly groaned when he took out his divination book. He could not believe that the original Harry had taken such a useless subject. Well, Harry did not argue that there were some individuals who could see part of the future, but to be able to see you had to have it in your genes, and Harry definitely didn't, and never would. He simply was not a descendant of a centaur born, and they were the only ones that ever showed the ability to see anything at all. So Harry did the only thing he could in a useless class like that. He faked his work and then took out another piece of parchment to write down some other things he was thinking about, like the work he had to do on the wards. He knew that the wards looked absolutely dreadful. In fact, they were worse than he had predicted, worse enough to give him a constant headache. "What are you doing, Harry?" Ron asked in that moment, and Harry placed his hand on the parchment with his ideas so that Ron couldn't read it. "Doodling," he answered his friend. "Sorry, Ron. Let's continue." And with that Harry packed away his parchment with ideas and concentrated again on the useless class he was taking. Maybe he could go to McGonagall and ask her to change classes. Regrettably, he would blow his cover very fast if he requested to take arithmancy or ancient runes, because there was no way that the original Harry could know enough of any of these classes to pass his OWLs. On the other side. Maybe later, Harry concluded finally. First I should go and find a way for Reg to enter Hogwarts again, and then the wards and Snape. I think I have enough to do for the next fortnight. And regrettably he had. So instead of planning to change electives, Harry suffered through this utter useless class and finally left with Ron. "And now defense," Ron said. "I hope she's better than she looks like." Harry doubted it, and just a short time later he was sadly proven right. The defense class was a joke, Harry soon decided. Professor Umbridge would have done well in staying away from a classroom. The book they had been assigned to read was just theoretical, and when Hermione pointed out that there was nothing mentioned about practicing the spells, they got into a discussion with their new teacher. Harry just sat back and watched them interact. It was not even 10 minutes into class when he was finally absolutely sure that Hogwarts would have better done without Professor Dolores Umbridge as a teacher. Umbridge clearly did not want to hear any critique by anyone, and she definitely did not care the slightest about the students she would teach. This final conclusion was just emphasized when Professor Umbridge spoke about her plans for class. "Now, it is the view of the Ministry that a theoretical knowledge will be more than sufficient to get you through your examination, which, after all, is what school is all about. And your name is?" Professor Umbridge said, staring at Parvati, whose hand had just shot up. Harry just sat back and admired Parvati's courage. After all, until now, Umbridge had dismissed everything Hermione or Dean Thomas had said. To try again, well, let's say that was definitely Gryffindor. Parvati Patil. Parvati said her name first, like they had been asked to do, before she added, "And isn't there a practical bit in our defense against the dark arts, Ep4? Aren't we supposed to show that we can actually do the counter curses and things? As long as you have studied the theory hard enough, there is no reason why you should not be able to perform the spells under carefully controlled examination conditions," said Professor Umbridge dismissively. "Without ever practicing them beforehand," said Parvati incredulously. "Are you telling us that the first time we'll get to do the spells will be during our exam? I repeat, as long as you have studied the theory hard enough. I fear there are still people in this class who will have trouble without practicing the spells beforehand, Professor," Harry said, finally having enough. It would do them no good if they have to cast the spell the first time for their exam. Umbridge turned to Harry. Her face was blank, but Harry could see the distaste in her eyes, and in that moment he knew he would not leave this classroom without a detention. "Do you doubt the ability of your classmates, Mr. Potter?" she asked him. "I didn't," Harry answered, "but there are always those that are nervous. It is easier for them to practice beforehand just to know that they can do it, madam. So you're telling me that the only reason you want to practice is for your examination? Her eyes looked at him in challenge. Should there be another reason, Professor? Harry asked coolly. Do not mock me, Mr. Potter. I am well aware of your illusions and the lies you spread in the summer, the professor hissed. I do not remember any lies, madam. Harry answered calmly. I was at my relatives the most of my summer holidays. As they are muggles, I did not talk with them about anything of the magical world. The only contact I had with the magical world were the Dementors and the Wizengamot, and I do not remember lying to any of them. Lies, Mr. Potter. I am well aware of what you talked about last summer. Everyone knows that you are under the illusion that you know who's back. You must have talked about this illusion for them to be aware. Umbridge hissed. I did not talk about anything like that in the summer, Harry answered coolly. Detention, Mr. Potter. First you dared to spread lies and now you deny that you told them. Harry just stared at her with cool, calculating eyes. He knew that the reason for his detention was not good enough to even lose house points. But he decided to not go against her. He had no time for her disbelief and hate. You will spend the rest of this week in detention with me, Mr. Potter, said she. Harry just looked at her. We will begin this afternoon at 5 o'clock. I already have detention today, madam, Harry said calmly. Professor Snape gave it to me this morning. Is that so? She said, looking at him as if he was an insect she wanted to crush beneath her shoe. Well then, I simply have to take the whole next week, as I am sure that it will take some time for your lesson to sink in. As you wish, Professor. She had sneered at him but then set her detention for the next week. Harry was all right with that, at least for now. He definitely would come back to her as soon as he was ready to take another step, and then she would be judged by him like everybody else in this school. At that evening after dinner he went to the office of the potion master for his detention. Enter, Snape growled when Harry knocked. Harry did as he was told and waited patiently in front of the teacher's desk until his teacher would look up from the essays he was correcting. Tell me how, Potter, Snape finally said coolly, pointing with one of his long fingers at the vial with Harry's potion. There is nothing I could explain, sir, Harry answered sincerely. So you could do it again? Snape sneered. Yes, Harry answered without hesitating. Snape just snorted. Well, we will see, he finally said. Then he led Harry in the classroom and pointed at a working space. I want another batch of healing balsam, a calming draught, some Skelegro and, well, how about a dreamless sleep? Snape grinned evilly. You have until 10 o'clock. Harry knew that Snape had tried to trick him with the potions. When Harry tried to do them one after another, he would not even have begun his second when his time was up. The only way to get them ready all in time was brewing them at the same time, an extremely difficult thing to do for even experienced potion masters. For a student it was impossible. So there was just one reason for Snape to give Harry a task like that. It was a setup to destroy Harry's self-esteem. Yes, sir, Harry simply said while he wondered what to do next. Should he botch it like every student did? It would be the reasonable thing to do. But Harry wanted to see the potion master all riled up, and doing something even a good student should not be able to do. Well, that definitely would let his teacher's head spin. Finally, Harry decided that seeing Snape gawking again was definitely worth to show skills. Harry shouldn't have, and started to look for usable cauldrons. Snape just sneered at him, but before he could say another thing, it knocked on the door again. Enter, Mr. Nott, Snape said, his voice chilly. Theodore Nott entered. He was pale and definitely nervous. Brew it again, Snape said in this icy tone he had been using with Nott since Nott's cauldron exploded. Do not make another mistake. We will speak afterwards. And with that he swept out of the room. So they would be alone. Disastrous if they really were both inexperienced students. Harry guessed that Snape hoped for a disaster to happen. Well, Harry would definitely not obey the potion master's wishes, so Harry just started to set up his cauldrons. Don't worry, he said to Nott while doing so. You will succeed this time. Nott just snorted. I am rubbish at potions, Potter, he spat, and this time I don't have Blaze to guide me when I'm wrong. I will not succeed. Harry just pointed at a place next to his working space. Use this working space and I will tell you what you have to do, he answered, while starting to heat his cauldrons to different temperatures. As if you could really help me, and as if you would if you could, Potter, not just. I can and I will, Harry answered, while starting to prepare his ingredients with experienced motions. Nott stared at Harry's working hands. You really know how to brew, don't you? He finally asked, astonished. I do, Harry answered and pointed again at the working space. Now set up your cauldron. Nott did as he was told, but stopped before lighting the fire. What are you doing, Potter? He asked Harry, looking at the 4 cauldrons in front of the Gryffindor. Brewing, Harry answered sincerely. I see that, Potter. Nott said, annoyed, but why do you have 4 cauldrons in front of you? I have to finalize 4 potions until 10. Harry answered, I can just do it when I brew them simultaneously. Are you crazy? You are not a potion master for Salazar's sake. Harry just shrugged. Professor Snake's instructions, he answered. I think he tried to set me up. Well, I think he set you up. You will never be able to. That's my problem, Harry said. Yours is another. Start with your potion. But Nott did not even listen. What potions shall you brew? You have not instructions and you also do not have your book out. The healing balsam, a calming draught, some skelegro and a dreamless sleep, Harry answered while adding ingredients left and right in his cauldrons. He heated up the cauldron on the right side, added another ingredient in the left, and then he stirred another cauldron and set the last one's flames down. Now start or you will never finish tonight, Harry said. Nott blinked, then hesitated another minute. Finally he did as he was told. Harry let him brew while he himself added ingredients, stirred, lowered the temperature or heated the cauldrons more and prepared the next ingredients. No, next is the powdered snake fang. Nott, Harry said a few minutes later, stopping Nott with one hand while adding ingredients to one of his own potions with the other. You have to grind it more. It has to be really soft powder. When it's ready it feels a little bit creamy. Nott followed Harry's instructions. But Harry did not just instruct, he knew that Nott would not learn anything if he just followed what Harry was telling him. So Harry also added some practical knowledge while he aided the other. The powdered snake fang is acid. When you would add the nettle after it, the substance of the nettle would be destroyed before it can react with the potion. Think about it like building a house. You need something between the stones to glue them together. When you don't do it, your house will break down with the first storm it is facing. When it was 10:30, Harry and Nott both bottled their potions. You really knew what you were talking about, Nott said, looking at his potion with a flabbergasted look. I never knew that I would be able to brew something like that all by myself. And I even understand now why I should not do some things. Harry snorted at that. So Professor Snape does not even teach his own house properly, he asked, while bottling the potion in his next cauldron. Nott just shrugged. I never understood what he was telling us, he said. It seemed all so complicated. When you told the same it sounded, well, simple. Well, Professor Snape is a potion genius, Harry said, shrugging. He might have problems to understand that you are not like him. Nott snorted. Definitely not, he answered. But you are like him, aren't you? I mean, you brewed 4 potions simultaneously, and you still were able to instruct me properly. I do not think very much when I brew something simple like that. Harry gestured at the potions in front of him. I brewed a lot of more complicated stuff. What? Nott asked, half astonished, half interested. Harry just shrugged and took out of his pockets some potions. This is Veritaserum, he said, pointing at the clear potion in his hands. I brewed it in the summer. The next one is a healing draught. It's for internal injuries. I brewed it last year on midwinter. The last one is Felix Felicis. You know, liquid luck. I brewed it the summer before last. Nott just stared at the potions in Harry's hands. Why by Salazar and Mordred did you ever have nearly failing greats in potions? He asked, flabbergasted. Because I saw no benefit in showing my talents to someone who wanted to hate me because of my father. Harry answered, shrugging. I thought I was rubbish in potions because our esteemed potion master told me so. It took some time until I understood that I was utterly wrong about that. Not just snorted. I cannot believe. No one told you? I am Muggle-raised, Harry pointed out, and there was no one who ever explained this world to me. Well, there was no one until last summer. Not just stared at him. But you are a Potter, he finally said. No, Harry answered, smiling. I am more than just a Potter, but even if I am, there are some persons who like me being clueless. They like it so much I did not even get the typical introduction in the wizarding world. The Muggle-born get but enough of that. We should clean up. Not cited and carried his empty cauldron to the sink. Harry frowned, and then he cited and shook his head. Let me do it, or you will have to scrub endlessly, he said, citing. Then he drew a single rune on every used cauldron. The cauldrons glowed blue, and then they were clean again. Not stared at the clean cauldrons. It was you, he suddenly said. Harry frowned again. Pardon? He asked. It was you. You were the one who shielded me. I could not understand where the shield had come from, and Blaise didn't know either. We thought that maybe Professor Snape, but it was you. Harry stared at the cauldrons and then back at Not's face. And if it had been me? He asked cautiously. Not just stared at him. Why? He finally managed to ask. Why did you do it? You are a Gryffindor and I a Slytherin. You hate me just because of that. I would be a hypocrite if I did, Harry answered, snorting. Pardon? Now Not was utterly confused. Harry just smirked. I am no Gryffindor, he finally confessed, grinning. Not blinked. You know that your school uniform says you are, don't you? He finally commented. Oh, I know, Harry answered, smiling. I asked the hat not to be put in Slytherin. Not stared at Harry. But why? Because I was a child. Harry answered, amused, and then added to his story. After all, why not give this Slytherin in front of him something to chew on for the next few weeks or month? I was Muggle-raised and the only things I heard about Slytherin were bad. Of course I didn't want to be there. So you just begged it to change your house? Yes, Harry answered. Now I find it utterly amusing. When there would be someone who would belong to Slytherin, it is I. Harry knew that if he ever would have been sorted instead of the original Harry, there would have been no way that Harry Potter would have been a Gryffindor. Harry might be brave if he had to, but he was far too Slytherin to ever be a Gryffindor and far too Ravenclaw to ever go into Gryffindor, even if he had asked the hat not to be put in Slytherin. But why? Not said. Harry just smiled. In that moment he felt a soft tingling in the back of his mind. Their time was up. One day I might tell you, he said, but not today. We get a visitor in a minute. The professor returns. And Harry was right. Just a minute later the door opened again and Snape entered. He stopped in the door and stared at the two students in front of him that placed the last vials with ingredients back where they belonged. What? He said, but Harry interrupted. Our potions are on the desk, Professor, Harry said. The potion master stalked through the room until he reached the desk with the potion vials. He picked up one of Harry's, then he picked up the next. His eyes widened. I told you I can do it again, Professor, Harry said, but when you suspect that Mr. Nott aided me, I am willing to do it again in front of you. Snape just stared at the vials, and then he finally sneered. I don't think that's necessary, Mr. Potter, he said, still sneering. Give me your potions book. Harry blinked. I do not have it with me, sir, he said. I'd have to go to Gryffindor Tower to bring it. Do not lie to me, Potter, Snape growled. I do not, Harry answered, and simply emptied his school bag on one of the tables. Look for it yourself. Snape sneered, but he did. He even went as far to test Harry's other books for spells. He did find nothing. Very well, Potter, you may go. Not follow me. And with that he stalked from the room. Nott had turned pale again when Snape spoke his name. His hands shook. Harry fetched Nott's potion from the table and gave it the shaking boy. Then he took out one of his own potion vials, one of the 3 he had shown Nott before. He filled an empty vial with a little bit of his potion and gave it to Nott. Take it before talking to him, he suggested. What? Felix, Harry simply answered. I do not know what he normally does to punish his Slytherins, but I know I would never let some of mine come to harm. Take it, and whatever it is you are fearing, you will be lucky enough to prevent it somehow. Just trust Felix. He knows what to do. Nott blinked and stared at the vial in his hands. Thank you, Potter, Nott said, and downed the vial. And I don't fear the professor. I fear my parents. He calls them when we do something wrong, and my parents are horrible. And with that he left. Harry stayed behind and waited until the door closed again. Then he smiled and started to hum. He was alone in the potion classroom. There would come no one any more for today. Why not brewing something enjoyable, he asked himself, smiling. And with that he returned to the cauldrons in the corner and picked one of them. He sat it up and started to brew again. There was a reason he once had been a potion master and teacher, after all. Later that evening, Severus Snape was sitting in his office. The conversation with Theodore Nott's parents had gone better than he thought it would, and now he had the rest of the evening free. So he sat at his desk, 5 potion vials in front of him. He stared at them. No, he glared at them. They were wrong. Well, they weren't. The potions they carried were perfect. Potion Master Standard perfect, but exactly that was the problem. They shouldn't be perfect, and it was driving him insane that he didn't know how they were. The Potter boy had brewed them. Severus Snape had even gone so far to use legilimency on Nott to verify it. So how? By Merlin. It was driving him insane.